Hello everyone, Omni-Sensei here with What If I Was Reborn as TOJI and DBZ with Frieza's Potential, Part 4. If you enjoy this content, please smash the like button. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to check out the original story linked in the description. I hope you enjoy listening to it.
The void of space stretched endlessly before her, a canvas of absolute darkness punctuated by the cold light of distant stars. Frieza flew through this emptiness, her white hair streaming behind her like a comet's tail, her body leaving no trail in the vacuum where sound couldn't carry her screams. She had fled. She, Frieza, Empress of the Universe, conqueror of 1,000 worlds, had fled. From what? From a human and an infant. From feelings she couldn't name. From weakness she refused to acknowledge. The memory of TOJI's face as he cradled their son burned in her mind. The tenderness in his expression, so alien to her experience, had triggered something inside her, something terrifying in how unfamiliar it was. Pathetic, she whispered, though no sound emerged in the vacuum. Absolutely pathetic. For centuries, she had ruled her empire with perfect clarity. Decisions were made with cold precision, emotions relegated to occasional amusement or irritation, never this churning chaos that now consumed her thoughts. A memory surfaced, TOJI standing before her on Namek, unflinching despite her power. Not cowering like the countless beings she'd encountered throughout her long life. Not worshipping like her soldiers. Not calculating advantage like her brother. Simply equal. Equal. The word itself felt strange. Before TOJI, she had known only two categories of beings, those beneath her, and Beerus, who existed in a realm so far above that comparison was meaningless. The god of destruction wasn't an equal, he was a force of nature, a reminder that even she had limits. But TOJI? TOJI was different. Born with power matching her own. A mind sharp enough to challenge her intellect. A moral framework that, like hers, prioritized his own desires above conventional ethics. Yet somehow fundamentally different in ways she couldn't fully articulate. He was fascinating. Another memory, TOJI laughing as they hunted together, the sound rich and genuine. Not the nervous laughter of subordinates, not the cruel chuckle of fellow tyrannical subjects, but something real. Something she found herself wanting to hear again. And then there was the child. Her son. The thought sent a jolt of something unfamiliar through her chest. She had created life before. Her transformations were, in essence, new forms she designed and built. But this was different. The infant had her eyes, TOJI's hair, features that combined them both in ways she found beautiful. When she'd first looked at him, something ancient and primal had stirred within her. A desire to protect, to nurture, to love. The emotion had terrified her more than facing Beerus himself. Love was weakness. Love was vulnerability. Love was what she had exploited countless times to break her enemies. She had forced parents to watch their children die, spouses to kill one another, siblings to fight to the death, all to demonstrate the fundamental weakness of emotional attachment. And now, she felt it herself. This pull toward another being. This irrational desire for their well-being above logical self-interest. It was unacceptable. So she had fled, back to her empire, back to the cold certainty of absolute power. Back to a universe that made sense. As she flew, stars streaked past in luminous trails. Her fifth form moved effortlessly through space, requiring no ship, no protection from the vacuum. She was a living weapon, perfectly designed for conquest and destruction. Yet for the first time in her centuries-long existence, conquest seemed hollow. What was the point of ruling galaxies when she couldn't rule her own emotions? What value was there in being feared by trillions when one human and one infant occupied her thoughts so completely? Ahead, a familiar star system came into view. The Imperial Capital, the system of 7 planets orbiting a massive blue star, each world terraformed to serve specific functions in her empire. Military training on the first, scientific research on the second, luxury resorts for her elite on the third, and so on. At the center, closest to the star, was her throne world. Even from this distance, she could make out the massive structures that dominated its surface, monuments to her power visible from space. As she approached, her communication system activated automatically, the implant in her ear connecting to the Imperial network. Unidentified vessel approaching the Imperial dash, the voice cut off abruptly. Lord Frieza? Is that you? She didn't bother responding. Let them scramble. Let them panic. The chaos of her sudden return would reveal which commanders were competent and which deserved execution for their lack of preparedness. Sure enough, within moments, she detected dozens of ships launching from the planet's surface, forming into the traditional honor guard formation. Communications flooded her implant. All hail Lord Frieza, return to us. Prepare the palace for His Majesty's arrival. Alert the Imperial Guard. Prepare the throne room. Frieza's lips curled into a cold smile. They still referred to her as a him, her long-maintained deception. Only her family knew her true gender. The rest of the universe believed the Emperor Frieza to be male, a fiction she had maintained for strategic advantage. Perhaps it was time to correct that misunderstanding. Her new form made the deception difficult to maintain anyway. As she descended toward the palace landing pad, she saw thousands of soldiers lined up in perfect formation, their armor gleaming in the blue star's light. Their fear was palpable even from this height, fear mixed with relief that their leader had returned. She landed with deliberate grace, her feet touching down lightly on the polished surface. Immediately, the assembled soldiers dropped to one knee, heads bowed. All hail Lord Frieza! They shouted in unison, the sound echoing across the massive landing pad. Frieza ignored them completely, striding past their rigid formations toward the palace entrance. Her white hair flowed behind her, her tail swishing with each step. She could sense the confusion in their postures. This new form was unfamiliar to them, more obviously feminine than her previous ones. Let them wonder. Let them whisper. Their opinions meant nothing. The massive doors to the palace swung open as she approached, revealing the long corridor that led to her throne room. Elite guards lined the hallway, each standing at perfect attention, eyes fixed forward, not daring to look directly at their emperor. Frieza moved through the corridor with measured steps, her mind already shifting to imperial matters. Reports would need to be reviewed, subordinates evaluated, territories reassessed. The routine of rule would help center her, push away the unwelcome thoughts of who she had left behind. The throne room doors loomed ahead, 20 feet tall, made from metals mined from a dozen different worlds, inlaid with gems worth more than entire planetary economies. They parted silently as she approached, the room beyond dimly lit as she preferred. Frieza stepped into her throne room, expecting to find her advisors waiting with reports and updates on the Empire's status during her absence. Instead, she froze. Seated upon her throne was a massive figure, easily 8 feet tall even while sitting. Gleaming bio-armor, polished to a mirror shine. Curved horns extending majestically from a regal head. A face that resembled her second form's, but broader, more masculine, with age lines that spoke of centuries of rule. King Cold. Her father. For perhaps the first time in decades, Frieza felt genuine surprise. Cold rarely left his own throne world, preferring to rule his portion of the empire from a distance, leaving the active expansion to his children. The king's eyes, the same violet shade as her own, regarded her with an unreadable expression. Slowly, with deliberate grace that belied his enormous size, Cold rose from the throne. Standing, he towered at his full height of 8 feet 8 inches, dwarfing Frieza's fifth form's 5 feet 8 inches frame. His tail, thicker and longer than her own, curled elegantly behind him. He descended the steps from the dais, each footfall echoing in the cavernous room. As he approached, Frieza maintained her composure, though her mind raced. Why was he here? What did he know? What did he want? Cold stopped before her, looking down from his impressive height, his expression still inscrutable. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken questions. Then, with a speed, Cold moved. His massive arms wrapped around Frieza, lifting her off her feet in a crushing bear hug. His booming voice filled the throne room. "My daughter. I feared you had met the same fate as your brother." Frieza's body went rigid with shock. Physical contact was not something the Cold family engaged in casually, or at all, really. The last time her father had touched her had been centuries ago, during combat training. "Father," she managed, her voice strained both from surprise and the pressure of his hug. "Release me. Immediately." Cold chuckled, the sound rumbling through his massive chest, but complied, setting her back on her feet. His hands remained on her shoulders, his eyes scanning her new form with evident interest. "This transformation suits you beautifully, my precious daughter," he said, his voice carrying the cultured tones that had instructed galactic diplomats and ordered planetary destructions with equal ease. "Far more appropriate than that masculine facade you've maintained all these centuries." Frieza stepped back, breaking the physical contact. "What are you doing here, father? And what do you mean about Cooler?" Cold's expression shifted to one of practiced sorrow. "Ah, so you haven't heard. Your brother is dead." Despite herself, Frieza felt a jolt of surprise. Cooler, dead? The smug, eternally jealous brother who had been her rival since birth? How? She demanded. Cold gestured toward the throne, where a holographic display activated at his command. The image showed a distant view of Earth, then zoomed in to show a golden figure on the ground, unleashing what appeared to be a massive energy beam that engulfed a smaller figure. Cooler, she realized. Before carrying him into a distant star. The Cooler force witnessed it through the communication devices your brother always carried, Cold explained, his voice carrying what seemed like genuine sadness. A golden warrior of some kind. One of the monkey's allies, we believe. A Sai Yang, perhaps, though changed somehow. Frieza watched the footage with mixed emotions. Satisfaction that her arrogant brother had finally met his end, yes, but also a strange sense of loss. Not grief, certainly. She had never loved Cooler. But his existence had been a constant in her life, a measuring stick against which she had defined herself. And there was shame, too. A Cold, defeated by a monkey? Unacceptable. How unfortunate, she said, her tone carefully neutral. Cold studied her reaction, his eyes missing nothing. Indeed. The loss of your brother is a blow to our family's prestige. The Cold dynasty has ruled this universe for millennia. To have one of our own fall to lesser beings is troubling. Frieza watched her father's performance with detached fascination. The perfect display of paternal concern, the carefully modulated voice expressing just the right amount of grief. Anyone else would believe it entirely genuine. But Frieza knew better. She had learned the art of manipulation from the master himself. Cole didn't love his children, he saw them as extensions of himself, tools to expand his influence, vessels to carry his legacy. A memory surfaced. Herself as a child, no more than 5 years old in equivalent human terms, standing before her father as he explained the technique for creating transformation forms. Your power is too great for your body, my daughter, he had told her. You must learn to contain it, to suppress it, to release it only when necessary. It had been a painful process, reshaping her own cellular structure, forcing her immense power into more compact forms. But she had succeeded, creating first one suppressive form, then another, each more efficient than the last. Cold had been pleased with her progress. "You have surpassed your brother already," he had said. "He required years to master what you have accomplished in months." It was the closest thing to praise she had ever received from him. Looking at him now, Frieza wondered, as she occasionally had throughout her life, just how powerful King Cold truly was. The official records listed his power level at 120 million, the same as her birth power. But Frieza had always suspected this was deliberate misinformation. Her father had taught her to create suppressive forms. Had he ever revealed his true power to anyone? Did he have transformations beyond the one he currently displayed? Or had he simply achieved such perfect control that he no longer needed distinct forms? These questions had lingered in the back of Frieza's mind for centuries. She both feared and respected her father's capabilities, aware that if he ever truly considered her a threat, she might discover answers she wouldn't survive to share. "Your absence has been concerning," Cold continued, bringing her back to the present, moving back toward the throne but not sitting. "The Empire has maintained stability, but rumors were beginning to spread. Some thought you dead. Others believed you had abandoned your responsibilities." His tone carried a subtle reprimand, though his expression remained benevolent. "I was indisposed," Frieza replied carefully. "Clearly," Cold agreed. "This new form, your fifth, I presume? It's quite remarkable. The power I sense from you has increased substantially." He circled her slowly, examining the transformation from all angles. "The white hair is a particularly elegant touch. And the more humanoid appearance, interesting choice." Frieza remained still, allowing his inspection. "The form was necessary. My power had grown beyond what my fourth form could comfortably contain." "Fascinating," Cold murmured. "And what prompted this growth?" "Your battle with the human on Namek?" Cooler mentioned encountering him as well when I communicated with him, before his unfortunate end. Frieza's eyes narrowed slightly. How much did her father know about TOJI? About what had happened after Namek? Before she could formulate a response, Cold suddenly froze mid-step. His nostrils flared, his head tilting slightly as if catching a scent. His eyes widened almost imperceptibly, a minute change that would have been undetectable to anyone who didn't know him as well as Frieza did. In an instant, Cold was before her, massive hands gripping her shoulders, face inches from hers. "You've been pregnant," he stated flatly. Not a question, a declaration of absolute certainty. "You've had a child." Frieza maintained her composure through sheer force of will, though internally she cursed herself. Of course. Frost demons could detect the hormonal changes in females who had recently given birth. It was an evolutionary adaptation from their ancient history, when infanticide had been common among rival families. "Where is the child?" Cold demanded, his grip tightening painfully. "What have you done with it?" When Frieza didn't immediately answer, Cold shook her, his massive hands nearly encircling her upper arms completely. "Where is my grandchild?" he hissed, all pretense of warmth vanishing from his expression. "You didn't kill it, did you?" His eyes had gone cold, truly cold, reflecting the void of space rather than any living emotion. "If you have destroyed a member of our bloodline," he continued, voice dropping to a dangerous whisper, "you will face consequences beyond imagining. Family above all, Frieza. Betrayal is not tolerated." Frieza almost laughed at the hypocrisy. Family above all? From the being who had taught her that sentiment was weakness? Who had pitted his children against each other from birth? Who would undoubtedly eliminate either of them without hesitation if they ever truly threatened his position? "The child lives," she said finally, meeting his gaze without flinching. "My son remains with his father." Cold's grip relaxed fractionally, though he didn't release her. "His father," he repeated, curiosity replacing anger in his expression. "And who might that be? Who could possibly have caught the eye of my daughter? The question carried layers of meaning. In their species' long history, mating was rare and selective. Frost demons could reproduce both asexually and sexually, but the latter was reserved for genetic combinations of significant potential. For Frieza to have chosen a mate, especially one outside their species, was unprecedented. Frieza carefully extracted herself from her father's grip, straightening her posture before responding. "His name is Toji Fushiguro," she said, her voice carefully neutral. "A human from Earth." A human? Cold surprise was genuine. How unexpected. "He is unusual for his species," Frieza continued reluctantly. "Born with power equal to my own." This information clearly startled Cold. His eyes widened, his tail twitching with interest. "Equal to yours? A human mutation with a birth power of 120 million. He shook his head in disbelief. "I would have thought such a being impossible." "As would I," Frieza admitted. "Yet he exists. His potential rivals my own. His adaptability exceeds it." Almost unconsciously, her voice took on a different quality as she continued describing Toji. His rapid learning curve, his strategic mind, his ability to master techniques after seeing them just once. "He created entirely new key constructs during our battle," she said, a hint of what might have been pride creeping into her tone. "Weapons, shields, traps, all improvised in the moment. His creativity in combat is remarkable." Cold listened with growing interest, his head tilted slightly. "His intelligence matches his power," Frieza continued. "He understands the universe as we do, seeing beyond the artificial constraints of conventional morality, recognizing power as the ultimate authority." She paused, realizing she had said more than intended. Cold was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite interpret, something between amusement and calculation. "Yet he values freedom above domination," she added, almost to herself. "He seeks power not to rule others, but to ensure his own autonomy." Cold's lips curved into a smile. "You speak of him with such pride," he observed. "Your husband must be remarkable indeed." Frieza's composure finally cracked. "Husband," she sputtered. "He is not dashed. No daughter of mine will be abandoned after being lain with," Cold interrupted, his voice suddenly hard as steel. "He will marry you." "That's ridiculous," Frieza protested. "I have no interest in pair bonding rituals. The child was an accident. A biological anomaly I neither expected nor desired." Cold expression darkened. "The child is of our bloodline," he stated, as if this settled the matter entirely. "And this Toji, whatever his origins, has proven himself worthy by producing offspring of extraordinary potential with you. He will join our family officially." "I refuse," Frieza said flatly. "I left them both behind. The matter is closed." Cold studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, surprisingly, his features softened. "I'll give you 1 year," he said, his voice almost gentle. 1 year to make it happen willingly. Before Frieza could respond, Cold turned and activated the throne room's communication system, a massive holographic interface that connected to all corners of the Empire. "Connect me to the cooler force," he commanded. The system complied instantly, projecting the image of a blue-skinned, yellow-haired officer who dropped immediately to one knee upon seeing King Cold. "Your Majesty," Salza said, head bowed. "How may the cooler force serve you?" "You have a new assignment, Salza," Cold announced without preamble. "In light of Lord Cooler's unfortunate demise, leadership of his territories will pass to a new lord, the Empire's new prince." Frieza stared at her father in disbelief. Was he truly going to "Your destination is Earth," Cold continued, confirming her fears. You will locate a human named Toji Fushiguro. You will treat him with the utmost respect and hospitality. He is to be brought to the imperial capital, not as a prisoner, but as an honored guest. Yes, Your Majesty, Salza responded. And what does this Toji Fushiguro look like? Cole turned to Frieza, one eyebrow raised. An excellent question. Daughter, what does this Toji look like? Frieza's lips pressed into a thin line. I don't see why Dasher describe him, Cole commanded, his tone brooking no argument. Frieza hesitated, then relented. Tall for a human. 6'2", approximately. Muscular build. Black hair, usually disheveled. Sharp features. A distinctive scar on his lip. She paused, then added reluctantly, physically, impressive by human standards. As she spoke, memories surfaced unbidden, Toji's body moving with fluid grace as they hunted together. The warmth of his skin against hers in the darkness of their cave. The intensity in his eyes when he'd held their son for the first time. A flush crept across her cheeks, which she desperately hoped her father wouldn't notice. Cold, of course, noticed immediately. His smile widened slightly. The artificial intelligence should have recognized him from the battle footage from Namek, he said, gesturing to the holographic display where a remarkably accurate rendering of Toji had appeared. Will this suffice? Salza on the other end of the communication nodded. We will locate him, Your Majesty. Excellent, Cold replied. Remember, he is to be treated as royalty. Any disrespect will be punished most severely. With that, he terminated the communication. Turning back to Frieza, he smiled benevolently. I must return to my own territories, he announced. The death of your brother requires certain adjustments to our imperial structure. But I expect to hear of your decision soon, daughter. He moved toward the throne room exit, then paused, looking back over his shoulder. The sooner you accept, the better for all of us, daughter. Before Frieza could respond, Cold had departed, leaving her alone in the vast throne room. Slowly, she moved to her throne and sank onto it, her mind racing with implications and possibilities. Her father's interference complicated everything. She had fled to escape the confusing emotions Toji and her son had stirred in her, only to find herself potentially forced to confront them again. The worst part was the tiny spark of something that had ignited in her chest at the thought of seeing them again. Not dread, as it should have been. Not anger. Something warmer, more dangerous. Almost unconsciously, her hand drifted to her abdomen, where her son had grown. For a brief moment, she allowed herself to remember the infant's face. So small, so perfect, with her eyes and Toji's hair. Her son. The realization struck her with unexpected force, she missed them. Both of them. The man who had matched her in every way, and the child they had created together. The thought was terrifying, exhilarating, and utterly confusing all at once. Frieza, Empress of the Universe, found herself trapped between two worlds, the empire she had built and the family she had abandoned. Between the cold certainty of power and the chaotic warmth of whatever this feeling was. For the first time in her centuries-long existence, she had no idea what to do next. The emerald sky had cleared after hours of acid rain, leaving the jungle of the planet glistening with deadly beauty. Droplets clung to the blue-purple vegetation, refracting light into miniature rainbows. Toji sat at the mouth of the cave that had become their home over the past month, cradling his newborn son in his arms. The infant's features were a perfect blend of his parents, Toji's jet black hair, but Frieza's eyes and pale skin. Despite the mixed parentage, Megumi appeared entirely human in form, with no visible biogems or armored plates. Just you and me now, kid, Toji murmured, gently adjusting the makeshift blanket wrapped around his son. It had been only hours since Frieza had fled. She'd stood there, staring at their child with an unreadable expression, before rising silently into the air and disappearing into the emerald sky without a word. TOJI would never admit it aloud, but the cave felt emptier without her. The silence was different now, not peaceful, but hollow. "What the hell am I supposed to do with you?" he asked the infant, who blinked up at him with those unsettlingly familiar violet eyes. "I don't know the first thing about babies, let alone half-frost demon ones." Did Megumi need special food? Would he develop Frieza's frost demon characteristics when he grew older? Would Earth's atmosphere even be suitable for him as a baby? Frieza it most definitely would have with how resilient she is, but was that always the case? Did frost demons even grow up fast like they did in the womb, or would he sun age normally? So many questions, so no damn answers. Megumi stirred in his arms, making a soft mewling sound that wasn't quite crying but definitely showed discomfort. I know, TOJI sighed. "We can't stay here." "But I'm not yet ready to leave." He glanced out at the jungle. The acid rain had stopped, making it safe to venture outside again. Though to be honest, that was more an excuse to still remain in the cave longer. He could have protected them with a key bubble. But he won't admit that. They needed supplies before attempting the journey to Earth, assuming Earth still existed. He had no way of knowing if Goku and the others had defeated Cooler. First things first, TOJI decided, his natural practicality asserting itself. You need a carrier. Using vines harvested from just outside the cave, TOJI fashioned a makeshift sling to carry Megumi against his chest. He lined it with the softest leaves he could find, creating a secure pouch that kept the baby close while leaving his hands free. "How's that?" he asked, looking down at Megumi, who had settled contentedly against his warmth. "Not exactly designer baby gear, but it'll do." With his son secured, TOJI ventured deeper into the cave to gather what few possessions they had accumulated during their stay: crude tools, containers for water, strips of dried meat from their hunts. As he packed, his mind worked through their options. His powers had fully returned, which meant he could create a key bubble to sustain them in space. The journey to Earth would take time, but it was their best option. Once there, he could find Bulma and Dr. Brief. They would know how to help with Megumi, if alive. They were smart after all. And he honestly had no other options. "Before we leave," TOJI said to the infant, who watched him with surprising alertness, "there's something I need to do." The jungle was alive with sound as TOJI made his way through the familiar paths they traveled together. Strange birds with 6 wings called from the canopy. Luminescent insects buzzed around flowering plants that snapped shut at their approach. He moved with practiced caution, avoiding the deadlier hazards they discovered during their month on this world, though now they were no longer deadly to him with his might returned. The absorption pools were particularly treacherous, innocent-looking amber puddles that would dissolve anything organic within seconds. Frieza had tried to push him into one during their first day together. The memory brought an unexpected smile to his face. When she'd tried it again 3 weeks later, and failed also, she'd been so annoyed, especially when he'd sensed the danger and dodged at the last second, sending her tumbling face first into a patch of mud instead. "Your mother doesn't lose gracefully," he told Megumi, who gurgled in response. Should have seen her face covered in mud. Thought she was going to blow up the whole planet. She probably would have too, if she could then. Their first crash site came into view. A massive crater now partially reclaimed by the blue-purple vegetation. This was where it had all begun, where they'd awakened powerless and immediately tried to kill each other. TOJI stood at the edge, remembering how he'd attempted to strangle Frieza in her sleep that first morning. She'd retaliated by trying to feed him to the animals later. "We didn't exactly have a conventional courtship," he admitted to Megumi. "Your mother tried to kill me at least once a day for the first 2 weeks." He carefully picked his way down into the crater, Megumi secure against his chest. At the bottom, traces of their first fire pit remained, blackened stones arranged in a circle, the ground still scorched despite the jungle's attempts to reclaim it. TOJI crouched beside it, running his fingers over the stones. "This is where we first talked, really talked," he said softly. "Not the usual banter. Where we actually discussed our first kiss together, if it could be called that." TOJI lingered there, and as he did, he remembered also their first genuine conversation with each other over their world views. The memory was vivid, Frieza sitting across the fire, her white hair gleaming in the firelight, her eyes reflecting the flames as she explained her vision of Empire with unexpected eloquence. He'd been surprised by her willingness to actually listen and talk, having thought her till then one who could not see beyond their own nose when it came to others' words and views. "You know, we later talked again too. This time about how we saw the world. She actually told me power wasn't just about physical strength," TOJI continued, speaking more to himself than to Megumi. "It was about influence, resources, information. An emperor with 1,000,000 soldiers is more powerful than a lone warrior, no matter how strong." I didn't say it then, but I agreed with her. "Didn't want her to know that I wasn't as arrogant as I showed myself to be," he admitted, as he rose to his feet. As he climbed out of the crater, an unexpected wave of emotion hit him, a tightness in his chest that he refused to acknowledge. He wasn't sad. He wasn't missing her. He was just concerned about their son. That was all. The stream where they'd first hunted together flowed with amber water, mineral-rich and slightly luminescent in the shadows. TOJI knelt beside it, filling a container he'd brought while keeping Megumi safely away from the water's edge. Something glinted among the rocks, a piece of Frieza's white bio-armor that had broken off during one of their fights. He picked it up, turning the fragment over in his hands. It was surprisingly light, almost crystalline in structure, with an iridescent quality that shifted colors as it caught the light. TOJI stared at it for a long moment, then tucked it carefully into the pouch he'd fashioned from animal hide. "Your mother is complicated," he told Megumi, who was watching a six-legged creature scuttle across a nearby rock with fascination. "Most people only see the tyrant, the monster who's destroyed worlds. And she is that, make no mistake." He paused, choosing his words carefully even though the infant most likely couldn't understand him. "But she's also brilliant. Strategic. Sometimes even funny, in her own twisted way." TOJI remembered a night during their third week when they'd been trapped in the cave by acid rain. Frieza had casually mentioned a planet whose inhabitants communicated entirely through interpretive dance. "She told me she'd attended a diplomatic meeting where the alien ambassador danced for 6 hours straight, trying to convey a simple trade agreement," TOJI said, smiling at the memory. "By the end of it, she was so bored she almost blew up the planet just to make it stop. But she didn't, she said the wine they produced was too good to waste." He looked down at Megumi, who had fallen asleep against his chest. "That's who your mother is. Someone who can appreciate beauty even while contemplating genocide. I don't think there's anyone else like her in the universe." Seated by the stream, TOJI removed the fragment of bio-armor from his pouch. After a long moment of looking at it, using precise control of his ki, he carefully split it into 2 equal pieces, then began to shape them. The material responded to his energy, becoming malleable under his power. He worked slowly, meticulously, shaping the first piece into a small oval with smoothed edges. When he was satisfied, he pierced a small hole near the top, then threaded a tough vine through it, knotting it securely to create a necklace. The second piece received the same treatment, though he made this one slightly smaller. When both were complete, TOJI slipped the larger pendant around his own neck, the iridescent fragment resting against his chest. The smaller one he carefully placed around Megumi's tiny neck, adjusting it to ensure it wouldn't choke the baby. "There," he said, his voice deliberately matter-of-fact despite the significance of the gesture. "Now you've got something of hers too." Megumi's tiny hand reached up, tiny fingers closing around the pendant. Something in the material seemed to resonate with the infant, whose eyes brightened as he clutched it. "Yeah," Toji murmured. "You recognize it, don't you? It's part of her." Near the crash site lay a small clearing filled with strange, bulbous fruits hanging from low vines. Toji approached cautiously, remembering all too well what had happened when Frieza had consumed one. "The Fly Grove, as I like to call it whenever we passed by it. Drove your mom nuts," he told Megumi. "This is where she got high as a kite." The memory was oddly precious now, Frieza staring in wonder at patterns only she could see, laughing at the sky, her usual composure completely abandoned. It was the first time he'd seen her truly unguarded. She kept pointing at the air, acting as if the colors were talking to her, Toji recalled, smiling despite himself. Megumi chose that moment to start fussing, his tiny face scrunching up in what would soon become a full cry. Hey, Toji said, awkwardly bouncing the baby in his makeshift carrier. "What's wrong? Are you hungry? Wet? How am I supposed to know?" He tried adjusting Megumi's position, checking the makeshift diaper he'd fashioned from soft leaves, making soothing sounds that felt ridiculous coming from his mouth. "I fought beings who could destroy planets," he muttered, "but I have no idea how to handle one crying baby. Some father I am." To his surprise, Megumi quieted at the sound of his voice, violet eyes fixing on Toji's face with an intensity that seemed impossible for a newborn. "You like that? Just hearing me talk?" Toji asked, continuing to bounce gently. "Well, I can do that. Not much of a storyteller, but I'll work on it." After a long moment of silently continuing to bounce the baby, Toji spoke again. "How did you do that?" he whispered to Megumi. "How did something so small become so important so quickly?" The mountain cave that had been their final shelter held the most intense memories. Toji stood at the entrance, Megumi sleeping peacefully against his chest. Inside, the remains of their life together were still visible, the fire pit where they'd cooked their meals, the bed of furs where Megumi had been born, the crude tools they'd fashioned together, and where they'd first given in to their attraction. Toji's mind drifted to that night, the storm raging outside, the tension that had built between them finally snapping. The way Frieza had looked at him, fury and desire mingled in equal measure. "It wasn't supposed to happen," he told the sleeping Megumi. "We were enemies. We still are, I guess. But that wasn't entirely true anymore, was it?" Something had changed during their month together. Their attempts to kill each other had become less frequent, more like dangerous games than genuine murder attempts. They'd begun to talk, really talk, about their lives, their philosophies, their views on the universe. He'd found himself looking forward to those conversations, to the challenge of matching wits with someone whose intellect rivaled his own. And somewhere along the way, without noticing it happening, he'd begun to see her differently. Not just as a powerful adversary or a convenient ally in survival, but as... Toji shook his head, refusing to complete the thought. Whatever he felt for Frieza was complicated, messy, probably unhealthy. She was a genocidal tyrant who had abandoned their son without a second glance. Any feelings beyond that were irrelevant. He didn't even know why he was talking so much about her. Maybe he just wanted Megumi to know a bit about his mother. But deep down he knew that was an excuse. Megumi most likely won't remember this. Unless frost demons had memories as good as Seir's. Megumi stirred against his chest, making small hungry sounds that quickly grew more insistent. "Shit," Toji muttered, suddenly realizing what he missed. "You need food. What do half-frost demon babies eat?" He had no idea if Megumi required milk like a human infant or something entirely different. Did frost demons even produce milk? Frieza had never mentioned it. "We need to figure this out fast," he said, his mind racing through options. Using his key sense, he scanned the surrounding jungle for anything that might serve as nourishment for an infant. To his surprise, he detected a cluster of small animals not far from the cave, tiny six-legged creatures that resembled a cross between rabbits and lizards. Their key signatures were remarkably pure, almost luminous compared to the other predatory beasts of this world. Worth a try, TOJI decided, setting off toward them. Hours later, with Megumi fed and sleeping contentedly, the meat pounded into paste and mixed with water had proven acceptable nourishment. TOJI stood on the highest mountain peak of the planet, looking out over the alien landscape. The binary suns were setting, casting twin shadows across the blue-purple jungle. In the distance, strange flying creatures performed aerial dances against the emerald sky. It was beautiful, in its deadly way. A planet that had changed everything for him. TOJI looked down at Megumi, studying the features that blended his own with Frieza's. The infant's tiny hand was wrapped around the bioarmor pendant, clutching it even in sleep. "It's you and me, kid," he said softly, the first words he'd spoken aloud in hours. "But we'll make it work." He'd spent the day preparing for their departure, gathering supplies and plotting their course, remembering the direction he flew to when fighting Frieza and the spaceship flew to Namek. Earth was distant, but reachable. With his powers fully restored, he could create a key bubble large enough to sustain them for the journey. More importantly, he'd come to a decision. Whatever Frieza chose to do, whether she returned to her empire or sought them out or simply disappeared into the vastness of space, he would raise their son. Not out of obligation, but because he wanted to. Because somehow, in the span of a single day, Megumi had become the center of his universe. "Your mother might come back someday," TOJI told the sleeping infant. "Or she might not. Either way, you'll always have me. I promise." He touched the pendant around his own neck, the iridescent material catching the last rays of the setting suns. "And you'll know who she is, what she is, the good and the bad. I won't lie to you about her." With that promise made, TOJI gathered his power. His white aura flared around him, illuminating the mountaintop like a beacon. He extended his ki outward, creating a bubble that grew larger and larger. The sphere expanded to an enormous size, comparable to a small moon. Inside this massive construct, he created a smaller, more concentrated bubble around himself and Megumi. The dual-layered approach would allow the larger bubble to serve as an oxygen reservoir, ensuring they had enough air for the long journey to Earth. With one last look at the planet where everything had changed, TOJI launched himself and Megumi into space. The massive key construct glowed like a second moon as it left planet's atmosphere, carrying father and son into the void. Inside, TOJI held Megumi close, their matching bioarmor pendants glinting in the light of distant stars. His expression was resolute but tinged with sadness. As Earth's solar system appeared as a distant point of light, TOJI whispered to his sleeping son, "We'll be okay," he promised, though whether he was trying to convince Megumi or himself remained unclear. Around 10 days after Cooler, around 30 days after TOJI and Frieza crashed on unknown planet, time ratio 1:3. The vastness of space stretched endlessly around TOJI as he soared toward Earth, his massive ki bubble cutting through the void like a comet. Within his arms, Megumi slept peacefully, tiny fingers still clutched around the bioarmor pendant. Earth grew from a distant blue speck to a recognizable sphere, its familiar continents and oceans becoming clearer as they approached. TOJI felt a strange tightness in his chest at the sight. He was bringing his son home to a planet he'd barely begun to know himself before being thrust into cosmic battles. "Almost there, little guy," he murmured to the sleeping infant. "Let's hope they're ready for us." As they breached the upper atmosphere, TOJI's power radiated outward in waves, from using such travel speeds. On the ground, the effect was immediately felt, and it was overwhelming. "What the dash?" Krillin gasped, dropping to one knee as the invisible weight crashed down upon him. "What is going on?" Across the field where they'd been sparring, Piccolo braced himself against a boulder, his normally stoic expression giving way to shock. Such power, It's washing over the entire planet. Vegeta stood rigid, his face a mask of grim surprise. The pressure reminded him of Kakarot's Super Saiyan transformation, that golden light-haired form that had defeated Cooler with terrifying ease. But this was different. Equally massive but somehow more controlled, more refined. Impossible, Vegeta thought, a cold sweat breaking out across his forehead. I thought the clown had achieved the pinnacle of power with his transformation. But this rivals it. Perhaps even exceeds it. But that is inconceivable. The legendary Super Saiyan is the strongest warrior in existence. Only Goku seemed relatively unaffected, standing tall amid the crushing pressure. A smile spread across his face as he gazed skyward. "Toji?" "He's finally back," he said simply, his eyes tracking something the others couldn't yet see. A streak of white energy cut through the clouds, descending toward a dense forest several miles away. The impact was surprisingly gentle, barely disturbing the foliage, creating only a small clearing where the ki bubble dissipated. Minutes later, the Z fighters arrived at the landing site, touching down in a loose semicircle around TOJI. Goku, Vegeta, and Piccolo landed first, followed by Gohan, Krillin, and Nappa. 3 more figures descended slightly behind them, Yamcha, Tien, and Chiaotzu. Toji stood in the center of the small clearing, Megumi cradled carefully in one arm. His appearance had changed somewhat, his hair longer, his body buffer, as if his time on the alien planet had honed him to an even more perfect fighting machine. "Welcome back," Goku called cheerfully, stepping forward with his hand extended. Toji clasped it firmly, genuine warmth in his expression. "Good to be back." His gaze shifted to the 3 unfamiliar fighters at the back of the group, his brow furrowing slightly in confusion. He of course recognized them, but was confused at their presence. Goku followed his line of sight. "Oh. You haven't met these guys yet. This is Yamcha, Tien, and Chiaotzu," he said, gesturing to each in turn. "They were killed by the Sairs before you showed up." The man with the scarred face stepped forward, offering a hand. "Yamcha. Heard a lot about you. Apparently you're the reason we're all still alive." Tien Shinhan, said the 3-eyed warrior with a respectful nod. "The Namekian Dragon Balls were quite helpful in bringing us back." The small, pale figure floating beside him simply bowed his head. "I'm Chiaotzu." Toji nodded to each of them. "Nice to meet you all. Seems like I missed quite a bit while I was gone." The casual reunion atmosphere shattered instantly when Megumi chose that moment to gurgle softly, squirming in Toji's arms. 8 pairs of eyes snapped to the infant, expressions ranging from curiosity to dawning horror. "Is that our baby?" Krillin asked, leaning forward to get a better look. Nappa's eyes widened to an almost comical degree. His massive hand rose, trembling finger pointing at the infant as realization struck him like a physical blow. That isn't. "Is that who I think it is?" Nappa stammered, his voice uncharacteristically high-pitched. Toji blinked, genuinely confused by the extreme reaction. He rubbed the back of his head awkwardly. I don't know who you think it is, but..." "To introduce him, this is my son, Megumi." The silence that followed was absolute. Even the forest creatures seemed to hold their breath. It remained for so long that it felt like an eternity. Then Vegeta erupted. "You're what?" The Saiyang Prince's face contorted with disgust and disbelief. His aura flared violently around him as he stepped forward, fists clenched. "I thought it was a mere distraction then, but it appears to be true. How could you, Toji? You laid with that devil, that monster, Frieza? After everything she's done." Toji's expression shifted from confusion to shock. "How do you even know about that?" Another awkward silence fell, broken by a nervous telepathic voice echoing in all their minds. It was my fault." King Kai's voice projected, sounding flustered and apologetic. I'm the one who had to tell them. Believe me, it was necessary. Wait. He knows. He can? He didn't see her, did he? No one is allowed to besides me. The moment King Kai's words registered, something changed in TOJI's demeanor. His power erupted without warning, a tidal wave of energy that dwarfed even his arrival. The pressure became crushing, forcing everyone except Goku to their knees. Trees bent away from him as if in a hurricane, and the ground cracked beneath his feet. What is this power? Piccolo gasped, struggling to remain upright. It's even greater than before. Vegeta, for the first time since his transformation, experienced genuine fear. The arrogance that had begun to rebuild after his battle with Cooler evaporated in an instant. This was power beyond comprehension, beyond even what he'd felt from Kakarot as a Super Saiyan. TOJI's eyes narrowed, his gaze shifted to the sky exactly where King Kai was seeing from, seeming to pierce through reality itself, focusing and forcibly strengthening connection directly toward King Kai's location in Otherworld. On his tiny planet, King Kai suddenly felt as if he were being examined under a microscope. A pressure descended upon his very being, like the weight of an entire galaxy concentrated into a single stare. Darkness pressed against him from all sides as he felt TOJI's attention lock onto him. I didn't see anything. I swear. King Kai blurted out, his voice trembling. I just knew when it began and I looked away immediately. The pressure intensified. King Kai's antennae drooped as he fell to his knees. It was for the best, I promise, he continued desperately. For the sake of the universe. Please don't kill me. Gregory and Bubbles cowered behind a tree as King Kai's small planet trembled. I'm sorry. I was just trying to be helpful. We needed to distract Cooler. As suddenly as it had appeared, the crushing pressure vanished. TOJI blinked, looking confused by what they were trying to say. Who? Distract Cooler, he said, glancing around at the others who were still struggling to their feet. Krillin, wheezing slightly, hastily explained, during the fight with Cooler, we were losing badly. King Kai created a distraction by telling Cooler that you and Frieza were. You know. He made a vague gesture with his hands. It worked. Cooler got so shocked that we managed to land a critical hit. Oh, TOJI said, his anger deflating. That makes a sick amount of sense, I guess. Vegeta, having regained his composure, stepped forward again. His face was flushed with a mixture of anger and embarrassment. How did this even happen? He demanded, gesturing wildly at Megumi. You laid with her? How could you do such a thing? TOJI, after a moment of silence, shifted uncomfortably, avoiding eye contact. He fidgeted, looking first at Megumi, then at his shoes, then at a particularly interesting cloud overhead. Finally, with his back half turned, he mumbled something almost inaudible. What did you say? Vegeta demanded, stepping closer. Speak up. TOJI sighed deeply. He swung around to face all of them, took a deep breath, and then she was beautiful, okay? A man and a woman trapped alone on a planet together, what the hell did you guys expect? He bellowed, the force of his shout making most of them flinch backward. The silence that followed was deafening. Birds took flight from distant trees. Somewhere, a cricket chirped awkwardly. Then Goku burst into uncontrollable laughter. He collapsed to the ground, clutching his stomach as tears streamed down his face. Nappa, after processing, slapped Vegeta hard on the back, nearly sending the prince sprawling. I knew it. Nappa crowed triumphantly. I called it. He's just like us. He crossed his arms, looking immensely smug as his gaze bounced between Vegeta and TOJI. Vegeta shoved Nappa away, his face contorted with disgust. Like us, don't you dare associate me with him. How could one sink so low to lay with that monster? Toji sighed heavily, rubbing his temples. A headache was beginning to form behind his eyes. This wasn't exactly the homecoming he'd imagined. Goku, ever practical, finally stopped laughing and climbed to his feet. "Hey, I bet you haven't eaten anything good in days. You must be hungry." "The little guy probably too," he declared, as he approached Toji and Megumi, and leaned a bit forward to see the baby up close. Megumi himself immediately began reaching for Goku with wonder in his violet eyes, catching his nose, and suddenly pinching it. "Oh!" Goku stumbled back, as he grabbed his nose. "Sheesh, he's a strong one. Must take after his dad," Goku said as he began to laugh again. "So, Kaikai's been cooking up a storm, celebrating our victory after finally having no threats anymore. You two up for it?" "I'd better warn Mom that we're bringing guests first," Gohan said quickly, already taking off into the air toward their home, he himself also completely confused and embarrassed, especially after Toji's last outburst. Goku nodded, gesturing for Toji to follow. "We'll go at a slower pace," he suggested, "give you and the little guy time to adjust to Earth again." As they took to the sky, flying in the direction Gohan had gone, Vegeta positioned himself beside Toji. The Saiyang Prince couldn't help but observe the human, a mixture of curiosity and frustration etched on his face. "Why did you do it?" Vegeta asked, his voice quieter now, almost hesitant. "Why did you spare her? She tried to kill you, and has hurt so many, including my planet. And you had a chance to get rid of her for good. You had to have, especially with what you were doing with her." Toji remained silent for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the mountains below. "I'm a father now, Vegeta," he said finally. "I need to think about more than just myself. Besides, I already told you once, I didn't want to fight her because of some moral reason. It was because I wanted to find someone strong enough to take my power and make it fun." Vegeta's eyes narrowed. "Fine," he finally said, after a long silence. His gaze shifted to Megumi. "But what will you do with that baby? How are you going to raise him? I bet you don't even know the first thing about frost demons, not like even I am or anyone else for that matter is any better. That knowledge has been eradicated from any and all archives. The brat being a halfling of two anomalies making him even more unknown." "I don't know what I'm going to do, Vegeta," Toji replied, getting frustrated himself at all the questions. "But I'll figure it out. And I know that I'll raise my son to be better than any of us. I promised him that," he said as he looked down at his son in his arms, whose were shifting in wonder towards the blue sky, and everyone else. "You're a fool, Toji," Vegeta said, though his tone was less harsh now. "Sentiment will be your undoing. But you are a strong fool, for that at least you have my respect." Toji glanced sideways at Vegeta, a ghost of a smile playing on his lips. "Thanks, Vegeta." As they neared Mount Paozu, Nappa let out a loud snore, having somehow fallen asleep mid-flight, beginning to fall downward. He couldn't sleep, unknown to them. Nappa remembered hell. "Hey, wake up you big oaf, we are here," Vegeta yelled, before sighing and pulling him up before he fell, flying them both, while carrying Nappa by his armor with one hand. Toji himself chuckled at that. It seemed somehow the two have gotten closer. "What a weird bunch," he muttered to himself as he looked at them all, wondering how much had changed during the time he was away. He wasn't too worried. He had time. Mount Paozu gleamed in the afternoon sun, the Sun family's modest home transformed by the festive atmosphere surrounding it. As Toji descended from the sky with Megumi securely cradled against his chest, he took in the unexpected sight below. Bulma had clearly outdone herself. Several large tables stretched across the yard, each covered with pristine white cloths and laden with plates, cups, and silverware that glinted in the sunlight. An outdoor kitchen had been set up nearby, where Kaikai and Panchi worked in perfect harmony, the delicious aromas of their cooking wafting through the air. Gohan spotted them first, waving enthusiastically from where he stood beside his mother. "They're here," he called out, drawing everyone's attention skyward. Toji landed gently on the soft grass, followed by Goku, Vegeta, Krillin, Nappa, Tien, Chiaotzu, and Yamcha. The group spread out as they touched down, Vegeta and Nappa keeping a noticeable distance from the three warriors they had killed during their first arrival on Earth. Ox King's massive form lumbered forward, his face split by a welcoming grin. "Welcome back, young man," he boomed, clapping Toji on the shoulder with enough force to make a normal human stagger. "We've been waiting for Dash." His words died abruptly as he noticed the small bundle in Toji's arms. "Is that?" The question hung in the air, drawing everyone's attention to Megumi. The baby, sensing the sudden focus, blinked his violet eyes curiously at the assembled crowd. A collective gasp rippled through the group. Dr. Brief's cigarette dropped from his slack mouth. Master Rosh's sunglasses slid down his nose. Kai froze mid-stir, wooden spoon dripping sauce onto the grass. "Oh my," Panchi breathed, her perpetual smile widening. "What a darling little baby." Bulma stood motionless, her eyes fixed on the infant. Something flickered across her face, surprise, confusion, and for the briefest moment, a flash of pain, before she composed herself, stepping forward with a bright smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Well, this is unexpected," she said, her voice carefully light. "Looks like you brought back more than just yourself from space." "Yeah." "It wasn't exactly planned, was sooner also than expected," Toji explained as he rubbed the back of his head, a bit embarrassed. Kai marched over, wooden spoon still in hand, her expression shifting from shock to stern disapproval. "Toji Fushiguro," she began, brandishing the spoon like a weapon, "are you telling me you had a child before getting married? What were you thinking? Where is this baby's mother? You two should be married immediately. A child needs both parents in a proper family unit." Toji shifted uncomfortably under her glare, adjusting Megumi in his arms. It was rare for anyone to truly have a problem with him besides family. He's not used to this. "Mrs. Sun." "It's complicated," he admitted slowly. "It's a long story, but to keep it short, I offered to set aside me and the mother's, differences for Megumi's sake. I would have." He hesitated, his expression growing more conflicted. "Married her if that's what it took to give him a proper family. But she left. She abandoned him, abandoned us." Kai's righteous indignation instantly transformed into maternal outrage. "She what?" she exclaimed, the wooden spoon now pointed skyward like a sword. "What kind of woman abandons her own child? And such a loyal, righteous young man? The nerve! The absolute nerve!" Toji's expression shifted into a bit of surprise at the complete 180 Kai made, as well as remained silent, not defending Frieza. Kai's words weren't exactly wrong. The memory of Frieza's cold voice declaring she would have killed their son in the womb if she'd had her powers earlier still cut deep. "Well, you've done the right thing bringing him here," Kai declared, her tone softening as she peered at Megumi. "A good meal will cheer you both up. Come, sit down. You must be starving." As Kai led him to the table, Toji caught Bulma's gaze. Internally feeling a bit guilty, since with his key sense, he could feel her pain. He knows they weren't really in a relationship, nor did he even try to make it happen, that she herself had been the one who had a crush on him, and logically by his own philosophy she is at fault for her own feelings and there is no blame on him, but he still felt bad for her. Emotions weren't exactly the simplest things to regulate. "All right, everyone. Since you're all here now, sit down," Bulma called out with forced cheerfulness. "Food's ready. Let's eat." The group settled around the tables, the awkward tension gradually giving way to the comfort of shared food and conversation. Plates were passed, drinks were poured, and gradually, the atmosphere relaxed. So, Krillin ventured between bites of roast chicken. What was it like? King Kai said you stranded on a planet. Beautiful, in a deadly way, Toji replied, balancing Megumi on his lap while eating one-handed. Everything there was trying to kill you. Acid rain, carnivorous plants, predators that could turn into mist. He shrugged. We spent most of our time trying to kill each other too. Wait, what? Yamcha nearly choked on his drink. You and that Frieza woman tried to kill each other? Toji looked at him confused for a moment, then reasoned that perhaps Yamcha still hasn't been told the story about Namek or hasn't really processed it yet. He decided to oblige, and just answer. Constantly, Toji confirmed casually. She pushed me toward an absorption pool, this thing that looks like water but dissolves anything organic. I retaliated by maneuvering her toward electrically charged vines. He glanced down at Megumi, who was contentedly gumming a soft piece of bread. Neither of us succeeded, obviously. And you still ended up together? Bulma asked, her voice carefully neutral. How does that even happen? Toji shrugged, his expression genuinely perplexed. I honestly don't understand it myself. Well, we had our share of excitement too, Goku interjected, sensing Toji's discomfort. Cooler showed up 3 days after you disappeared. He was even stronger than Frieza, Krillin added, unconsciously rubbing his chest where Cooler's blast had enveloped and killed him. We tried everything, but he was just too powerful. I died protecting Vegeta, Nappa announced proudly, slapping the prince's back. Vegeta scowled but didn't push him away. Took a blast meant for him. Pretty heroic, right? And I got blown to bits trying to help, Krillin added. Though my Destructo disc did manage to cut off Cooler's arm. That's when Kakarot transformed, Vegeta said, his tone a mixture of respect and envy. The legendary Super Saiyan. Toji couldn't quite hide his surprise. Super Saiyan? The form you kept talking about during our trip to Namek? It's real. Obviously, Vegeta stated as he took a bit of a chicken leg. Don't speak with your mouth full, Vegeta, it's impolite, Bulma jabbed. What I'll eat however I damn want, woman. I'd love to see it if you don't mind, Toji asked Goku, turning his face towards him, ignoring the bickering too. It seems that despite Bulma's crush, she and Vegeta had at least gotten somewhat closer during his time away. Perhaps she'll end up with him like in the original timeline. Sure thing. Goku agreed enthusiastically, already half rising from his seat. Goku! Kaikai's voice cracked like a whip. Nobody is transforming or fighting until everyone has finished eating. These ladies worked hard on this meal. Sorry, Kaikai, Goku apologized, sinking back into his seat with a sheepish smile. After dinner, then? After dinner, she confirmed, her stern expression softening as she watched her husband pile more food onto his plate. As the meal continued, Toji noticed Gohan sitting nearby, eyes glued to a tablet screen. Occasionally, the boy would glance up at him with a thoughtful expression before returning to whatever he was watching. Finally, during a lull in conversation, Gohan blurted out, Mr. Toji, does this mean you're like Darth Vader who ended up with a female Empress Palpatine? The question was met with stunned silence, followed by sputtering from Bulma, Toji, and several others familiar with Star Wars. Gohan's eyes widened as he realized what he'd said. No, wait, that's not what I meant, he corrected hastily. You're the chosen one, but you stayed on the light side. You didn't fall like Anakin did. Kaikai sighed deeply. I'm so sorry, Toji. Gohan's been obsessed with these Star Wars movies lately. She shot a mock glare at Bulma, who suddenly became very interested in her water glass, whistling innocently. Someone introduced him to them recently. Hey, they're classics. Bulma defended herself. Every kid should watch them. TOJI, more amused than offended, turned to Gohan. The Chosen One? What do you mean by that? Gohan's face lit up at the question. In Star Wars, Anakin Skywalker was the Chosen One, prophesied to bring balance to the Force. He was literally born from the Force itself, no father. That's why he was so naturally powerful. The boy leaned forward eagerly. I think maybe you're like that, but with ki. That's why you were born so strong and can learn techniques just by seeing them once. You're the son of ki. TOJI chuckled. I hate to disappoint you, Gohan, but I had a father. It doesn't have to be exactly the same, Gohan insisted. But it would explain why you're so different from everyone else. Why you're a natural at everything ki-related. TOJI considered this, surprisingly touched by the boy's theory. I suppose that's as good an explanation as any, he conceded. Though of course didn't believe it. He himself reasoned it was because of the special nature of his soul. Gohan's eyes suddenly widened with excitement. He turned his tablet around, showing a picture of Darth Vader in his iconic black suit. Mr. TOJI, would you wear this? You're tall enough to be Darth Vader. It would be so cool. TOJI blinked in surprise. I don't exactly own a costume like that, Gohan. The boy's gaze immediately shifted to Piccolo, who had been silently eating at the end of the table. Mr. Piccolo, could you make one with your materialization beam? But without the control panel, Mr. TOJI isn't injured, please. Piccolo's expression darkened. I am not a clothing store, Gohan. Please? Gohan clasped his hands together, deploying what TOJI recognized as the dreaded puppy dog eyes technique. Just this once. Piccolo held out for approximately 10 seconds before his resolve crumbled. Fine, he growled, rising from his seat. Stand up, TOJI. As TOJI amusedly complied as he handed Megumi to Kai. He internally couldn't help but marvel at how different this Gohan was from the one he remembered from the show. This boy was carefree, playful, unburdened by the trauma of watching his friends die or being forced into battle too young. He hadn't had his neck broken by Rikum, hadn't seen Piccolo, the man he had begun to see as an uncle and a big brother, sacrifice himself for him because of his own fear, or faced the hopelessness of fighting someone with absolute power. Frieza. This Gohan had grown up with certainty that the good guys would win, that adults would protect him, that evil would be vanquished. And TOJI was glad about that. Somehow, his presence in this world had preserved a child's innocence, and that felt better than a lot of things. Piccolo pointed 2 fingers at TOJI, a beam of light shooting forth. At least this will be better than that ridiculous caveman outfit you're wearing, the Namekian muttered as the light enveloped TOJI. When the glow faded, gasps and exclamations erupted around the table. TOJI looked down at himself, now clad in the full Darth Vader regalia. Black armor, flowing cape, and the distinctive helmet covering his face. It was made by Piccolo from comfortable and extremely durable material. A mechanical breathing sound accompanied each breath he took. This is actually pretty awesome. TOJI's voice came through the helmet's modulator, deep and resonant. Gohan circled him, eyes wide with wonder. It's perfect. You look just like him. Everyone except Vegeta, Nappa, and Piccolo applauded the transformation. Even Shishi seemed amused, covering her smile with one hand. Can you make a lightsaber with your ki like you make your staff? Gohan asked excitedly. Show us some moves. TOJI obligingly formed a beam of white energy in his hand, shaping it into a cylinder with a longer beam extending from one end. He gave it an experimental swing, the humming sound cutting through the air. Use the Force, Mr. TOJI. Use telekinesis, Gohan encouraged, bouncing on his toes. TOJI had just begun demonstrating some basic moves when a massive shadow fell across the gathering. Everyone looked up to see an enormous spacecraft hovering overhead, its design sleek and predatory, unmistakably of the same origin as the Saiyang pods, but vastly larger. "What the dash?" Krillin began, rising from his seat. The ship moved away, coming to rest several miles distant. A ramp extended from its underside, a red carpet rolling out in an oddly formal display. 3 figures descended. A blue-skinned humanoid with yellow hair, a tall brown reptilian being, and a tall, big alien with green skin. They flew towards them and descended before them as they then approached with measured steps, their postures deferential rather than threatening. When they reached the edge of the gathering, they stopped and bowed deeply. "Greetings," the blue-skinned leader said, his accent thick but his words clear. "We are the Cooler Force, now under new management. We seek TOJI Fushiguro. It is a matter of great importance." From behind his Darth Vader mask, TOJI suppressed a sigh. He should have known his peaceful return wouldn't last long. The universe, it seemed, had other plans. The Cooler Force members stood at rigid attention before the imposing figure in black. Despite their years of service to one of the most feared beings in the universe, they found themselves unnerved by the towering presence before them. TOJI, fully encased in the Darth Vader costume Piccolo had created, loomed over them like a living shadow. The mechanical breathing that accompanied each rise and fall of his chest echoed across the suddenly silent gathering. His cape billowed slightly in the breeze, adding to his otherworldly appearance. Salza, the blue-skinned leader, fought to maintain his composure. There was something deeply unsettling about this dark figure, something that went beyond mere physical intimidation. The black helmet revealed nothing of the man beneath, the expressionless mask reflecting Salza's own anxious face back at him. It was as if his very power filled the air itself, and pressed upon them. "Who seeks me, and for what purpose?" TOJI's voice emerged through the modulator, deep and resonant, carrying the same menacing timbre as the Sith Lord he intentionally emulated. "If you're gonna look like Darth Vader, you better act like him too. It's fun. And useful, when it comes to intimidation, would also most likely aid him with his ruling plans." Salza swallowed hard, realizing that this is the TOJI Fushiguro they've been sent for, his yellow hair swaying as he bowed lower. "My lord, we are the elite squad of the former Cooler Force. I am Salza, and these are my comrades, Dor and Knees." He gestured to the large green-skinned warrior and the reptilian being beside him. "Former?" The mechanical voice questioned, the sound of his breathing filling the pause between words. "Yes, my lord," Salza continued, carefully choosing his words. "Our previous master, Lord Cooler, has been slain." His eyes flickered briefly toward everyone, almost searching for who it was among them. "King Cold, ruler of the Cold Empire, has sent us with a message of great importance." The mechanical breathing continued, steady and unwavering as TOJI waited for him to continue. "His Majesty has learned from the Empress herself that you, Lord TOJI, are father to the heir of the Empire." Salza kept his head bowed as he delivered this news. "King Cold extends his personal invitation for a meeting to discuss you joining the Empire as the new Lord of the Cooler Force, overseeing the territories previously under Lord Cooler's command." A murmur rippled through the gathered Z fighters. Kai clutched Megumi closer to her chest, her expression darkening with protective instinct. TOJI looked down at the bowing aliens, the expressionless mask betraying nothing of his thoughts. After what seemed like an eternity of breathing, he spoke. "Very well. I accept the king's invitation." The simple statement confirmed his desire and sent shockwaves through the gathering. The Z fighters erupted into noise. "You can't be serious!" Krillin exclaimed. "It's obviously a trap," Yamcha added. "TOJI, think about what you're doing," Bulma called out. TOJI raised a single gloved hand, and the protests died instantly. Despite being new to the group, despite his youth compared to most of them, his authority was absolute. In serious moments like this, he commanded respect without effort. For he was the strongest. "I know what I'm doing," he stated simply, the voice modulator giving his words added weight. He turned and walked past the still bowing Cooler Force members. With a subtle gesture, he telekinetically lifted Megumi from Kaikai's arms, surrounding the infant in a protective bubble of ki that floated alongside him. The baby gurgled happily at the sensation of flying, tiny hands reaching for the shimmering energy around him. "Vegeta, Nappa," Toji called without turning, "follow me." The two Saiyans exchanged confused glances, hesitating. "What do you mean?" Vegeta demanded, his brow furrowed. Toji half-turned, the mask's empty eye-hole somehow conveying disappointment. "Have you forgotten? You are my subjects." That has not changed. As his breathing sound continued to fill the silence for a moment, he continued. "And Vegeta, you agreed to be my future Grand Regent, did you not? Or are you going back on your word?" Vegeta's fists clenched at his sides, teeth grinding audibly. Pride warred with indignation on his face before settling into grim acceptance. "Fine," he spat, stepping forward. "I am a man of my word." Nappa followed without protest, falling into step behind his prince. "Wait!" Two voices called out simultaneously. Toji turned to see both Goku and Bulma stepping forward, looking surprised at them speaking at the same time. "I'm coming too," they said in unison, then glanced at each other in confusion. The protests were immediate and strong. "Absolutely not!" Kaikai exclaimed, directing her fury primarily at Bulma. "It's too dangerous." "You can't be serious," Krillin added, looking at his oldest friend with concern. "Bulma, think about what you're saying," Master Roshi cautioned, his sunglasses slipping down his nose as he shook his head. Bulma stood her ground, hands on her hips. "I want to see how advanced this empire is, everyone. I had no chance last time. I'll be perfectly safe with Toji there," she countered. "Besides, I'm the smartest person here besides my father. If it comes down to negotiations or technology, there's no one better qualified." Toji considered her argument, then turned to Goku. "And you? Your case is more complicated." He tilted his head slightly. "You killed Cooler, King Cold's eldest son." At this statement, the three Cooler Force members couldn't hide their reactions at realizing finally that the Golden Warrior was him. Hatred flashed across their features, their key signatures flaring with barely contained rage before they managed to compose themselves again. Their loathing for Goku was palpable to anyone with the ability to sense energy. Goku, seemingly uncaring to their animosity, simply placed his hands on his hips and grinned confidently. "I'm coming for the extra muscle." Toji's considered both requests. "Very well," he finally agreed. "You may both accompany us." Salza stepped forward, his composure cracking slightly. "My lord, if I may," he began, his accent thickening with stress, bringing the killer of Lord Cooler to the Imperial capital would be unwise. Toji turned toward the blue-skinned warrior, gazing down at him for a long moment. Seeing that it was out of genuine concern, he decided to forgive him, contradicting him this once. "I sense your concern, Salza. It is unnecessary. I know what I am doing." "But my lord," Salza persisted, "I doubt King Cold." His words cut off abruptly as his hands flew to his throat. An invisible force had closed around his windpipe, lifting him several inches off the ground. Toji's hand was raised slightly, fingers curled in a loose grip. "I find your lack of faith disturbing," Toji stated. After a few seconds, he released his telekinetic hold, allowing Salza to drop to his knees, gasping for air. From the corner of his eye, Toji, whose focus had been on Gohan, caught his reaction, pure awe, as if TOJI had just hung the moon in the sky. Piccolo, standing behind the boy, scoffed internally. The Namekian wasn't fooled. He recognized that TOJI had used Salza's insubordination as an opportunity to impress the boy, having been forced to watch the movies with him by Gohan. Show off, Piccolo thought, though his mental tone carried more amusement than malice. Dor, the massive green-skinned warrior, hesitantly stepped forward after helping Salza to his feet. Lord TOJI, he began, his deep voice rumbling with deference, if these individuals are to accompany you, they will need proper armor. Armor? TOJI questioned. Yes, my lord, Dor explained. In the Empire, those who accompany a lord without traditional armor are seen as equals in authority. For your first appearance in the imperial capital, it would undermine your status. Everyone turned toward Piccolo, who stared back in confusion before realization dawned on his face. Why are you all looking at me? He demanded, though he already knew the answer. After a moment, he sighed heavily. Fine. With visible annoyance, Piccolo pointed at Goku and Bulma. A beam of light shot from his fingertips, enveloping them both. When it faded, their appearances had transformed completely. Goku's powerful frame was now encased in traditional Saiyang battle armor identical to what his brother Raditz had once worn. It was a brown and black chest plate with prominent shoulder guards. Beneath the armor, a black compression suit covered his arms and legs, with white wristbands and white Saiyang boots with gold tips. Without his signature orange GI, Goku's facial features seemed sharper, more Saiyang-like. Only his eyes remained unchanged, still carrying their characteristic gentleness. Bulma herself now wore royal Saiyang armor modeled after Vegeta's, a white chest plate with gold accents. Beneath the armor, a form-fitting royal blue bodysuit covered her from neck to ankles, complemented by white gloves and matching boots. Her blue hair was styled in a practical high ponytail. Goku examined his new attire with mixed feelings. It feels weird, he admitted, though he appreciated how lightweight the armor was compared to its appearance. Brings back some bad memories. Bulma, on the other hand, seemed pleased with her look. Not bad, she commented, examining the armor's craftsmanship. Functional and stylish. If you're all quite finished, Vegeta growled, already striding toward the ship, let's get this over with. The farewell was brief but emotional. Kai extracted promises from Goku to stay safe and return quickly. Dr. Brief offered technical advice to Bulma about documenting any advanced technology she might encounter. Gohan hugged his father tightly, trying to appear brave despite his obvious concern. As they prepared to depart, TOJI led the procession toward the ship, Megumi floating happily beside him in his ki bubble. Vegeta and Nappa followed, with Salza, Knees, and Dor maintaining a respectful distance behind them. Goku carried Bulma princess style as they flew, her armor gleaming in the sunlight. The massive spacecraft dwarfed them as they approached. Its sleek, predatory design spoke of both speed and power, a vessel worthy of an imperial fleet. The red carpet extended from the ramp as they descended upon it, and walked on it towards the ship. Inside, the ship's interior matched its impressive exterior. Polished metal corridors led to a central command bridge where crew members worked at various stations, each dropping to one knee as TOJI passed him, being at the forefront clear enough to be the new lord. Set course for the imperial capital, Salza instructed the pilot, who immediately began the launch sequence. As the engines hummed to life, TOJI moved to the main viewport, crossing his arms as he watched Earth grow smaller beneath them. Megumi's bubble floated beside him, the infant seemingly fascinated by the stars emerging in the darkness of space, having missed seeing them from their first flight towards Earth. Behind him, the group had gathered in the ship's central briefing room. Bulma, now fully embracing her role, sat at the head of the table opposite TOJI's empty seat, her armor gleaming under the overhead lights. "All right," she began, "before we arrive, I want to know everything. What exactly are we walking into?" Salza, Knees, and Dor exchanged glances, clearly uncomfortable with the interrogation but unwilling to refuse after TOJI's earlier display. The Imperial capital isn't a single planet, Salza explained, his accent more pronounced under stress. It's a system of 7 planets orbiting a massive blue star, each serving a specific function in the Empire. 7 planets? That's a lot. Bulma's eyes widened. What are they used for? The first is for military training, Dor rumbled, his deep voice carrying easily across the table. The second houses research facilities. The third contains luxury resorts for the elite. And the others? Vegeta demanded, leaning forward. Despite having served Frieza for decades, he'd never been permitted to visit the Imperial capital. Administration, food production, manufacturing, and the throne world, Salza continued. The throne world orbits closest to the star, making it the most secure and difficult to approach. What about defenses? Nappa asked, surprising everyone with his tactical question. How heavily guarded is this system? The most heavily defended location in the universe, Knees hissed, speaking for the first time. His reptilian features contorted into what might have been pride. Automated defense systems, planetary shields, and the Imperial fleet's headquarters. And that's where we're headed. Goku stated, still cheerful, and even a bit excited despite everything. Yes, Salza confirmed. Directly to the throne world. What about King Cold himself? Vegeta pressed, his knowledge of the former emperor limited to rumors and Frieza's occasional mentions. What should we expect? The 3 Cooler Force members tensed visibly at the question. His Majesty is formidable, Salza finally answered, choosing his words with extreme care. Perhaps even more powerful than either of his children, though he rarely demonstrates his power directly. Is he actually stronger than Cooler was? Goku asked bluntly. Dor's massive fist clenched at the casual mention of his fallen master by his killer, but he controlled himself. Lord Cooler was the eldest, but the Empress was born with greater natural power. King Cold, Lord Cooler estimated, surpasses them both. By how much? Bulma asked, her scientific mind seeking quantification. No one knows, Salza admitted. Not even Lord Cooler could guess. His Majesty has never been forced to reveal his full strength. Vegeta's expression darkened. What about the political situation? With Cooler dead and Frieza indisposed, who commands the Empire now? King Cold has temporarily assumed direct control, Salza explained. But the Empire is vast, over 70% of the known universe. It cannot be managed by one being indefinitely. Which is why he wants TOJI, Bulma surmised. To fill the power vacuum. Precisely, Salza nodded. The heir must have a father figure of appropriate strength. The heir? Nappa leaned forward, his massive frame making the reinforced chair creak. You mean the baby? Megumi. Yes, Knees confirmed, internally making sure to remember the baby's name. The child of the Empress and Lord TOJI represents the continuation of the Cold dynasty. Such bloodlines are sacred in Imperial culture. And what about the Empress herself? Bulma asked, her tone carefully neutral. Where is she now? At the Imperial capital, Dor answered. She returned several days ago, causing quite a stir. Her new form was unexpected. New form. Goku perked up at this. You mean her transformation? The royal family can transform to control their power, as you should know. Salza explained, with a bit of harshness at the end. The Empress has revealed a 5th form, something previously unknown. It is said by her to be her true appearance. And she's female, Nappa added unnecessarily. Still can't believe we never knew. Few did, Salza said. It was a closely guarded secret, known only to the royal family and their most trusted advisors. What kind of reception should we expect? Who should we expect to be there? Vegeta asked, his mind already planning for contingencies. He didn't fear the weaklings, but they could be a nuisance. In a high-level battle, if they were to fight Cold and Frieza, even the slightest distraction could be fatal. Will we be welcomed or viewed with suspicion? The ones who will attend are secret, even to us. It is conventional for their protection as the highest-ranked regents in the empire for their identities to be hidden from anyone that is not part of the royal family, acting through representatives who themselves don't know their true faces. Salza explained. Vegeta's eyes narrowed. Conventional implied that in unconventional cases those identities were known. He'll grill this blue freak later for more information about that. Lord Toji will be welcomed as befits the father of the heir, Salza continued, assuring them. You, as his close subjects, will be accorded appropriate respect. His gaze shifted to Goku, hardening slightly. The killer of Lord Cooler, however, will be under my protection, Toji's voice interrupted from the doorway. He stood with arms crossed, Megumi's bubble floating beside him. Anyone who threatens him answers to me. The Cooler Force members immediately dropped to one knee. Yes, my lord, they chorused. What about living arrangements? Bulma continued, seemingly unfazed by Toji's dramatic entrance. Where will we be staying? The Imperial Palace has guest quarters for visiting dignitaries, Salza explained as he rose. Though I imagine Lord Toji will be offered permanent residence in the royal wing, near the Empress's chambers. And the baby? Goku asked, making faces at Megumi through the ki bubble, earning delighted giggles from the infant. Does he get his own room too? The heir will have an entire suite, Knees confirmed. With attendants, guards, and tutors appropriate to his station. Tutors? Bulma questioned shocked. He's barely a week old. Frost demon development is accelerated compared to most species, Dor explained. Within months, he will begin speaking and walking. Within a year, he will require education befitting his status. Finally, some information that I can actually care about right now, Toji thought to himself. How long will it take us to reach the capital? Toji asked, his voice cutting through the conversation. 1 week, my lord, Salza replied promptly. This vessel is the fastest in the empire. Lord Cooler always valued speed above all else. And what about communication? Bulma pressed. Can we contact Earth during the journey? The ship is equipped with long-range communication systems, Salza confirmed. Though transmissions may experience delay over such distances. One last question, Vegeta said, his expression serious. What happens if we refuse this invitation? If we were to turn around and return to Earth? The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. The 3 Cooler Force members exchanged uncomfortable glances. That would be unwise, Salza finally answered, his voice barely above a whisper. King Cold is not accustomed to being refused. If the heir and his father do not appear as requested, His Majesty might take personal action. He would come to Earth, Toji translated, his mechanical breathing filling the silence that followed. Yes, Salza confirmed grimly. And unlike his children, King Cold has never been known for restraint when displeased. Silence followed. Well then, Bulma broke the tension with forced cheerfulness, I guess we'd better make ourselves comfortable for the journey. Night cycle has been initiated, Salza announced, clearly relieved to change the subject. I shall show you to your quarters. They are to be given the best accommodations, Toji instructed, brooking no argument. In my hierarchy, they outrank you and your men. Salza's expression tightened momentarily before smoothing into practiced deference. Of course, my lord. Please, Follow me, he instructed Bulma, Vegeta, Goku, and Nappa. As they disappeared down the corridor, Toji remained at the viewport, Megumi's bubble floating gently beside him. The mechanical breathing of his helmet filled the silence as stars streaked past, Earth now just a distant blue speck behind them. They were on their way to the heart of the Cold Empire. He could sense her even from here, has been sensing her since she left, never letting her out of his constant awareness. Soon he'll meet her again. Toji clenched his arm at the thought. Earlier than expected. He muttered to himself. Stars glittered like distant jewels across the infinite blackness of space, visible through the open ceiling of the Imperial Observatory. The massive chamber, large enough to house a small battleship, served as Frieza's private throne room, a place where she could contemplate the empire that stretched across 70% of the known universe. Her throne, carved from a material resembling obsidian but far more ancient and valuable, sat upon a raised dais in the center of the room. Surrounding her, holographic displays flickered with real-time information from various sectors of her dominion, resource reports, military movements, scientific breakthroughs, all flowing like tributaries into the river of her awareness. Frieza sat perfectly still, her white hair cascading down her shoulders, violet eyes fixed on the stars above. She absently touched the side of her neck where Toji had choked her during their final encounter, the memory bringing both fury and something else, something she refused to name. The conflicting emotions that had plagued her since leaving the jungle planet seemed to intensify with each passing day. "How could I let this happen?" she murmured to the empty chamber, her voice echoing softly. "I am Frieza, Empress of the Universe. I do not feel this." Yet she did feel it. She felt rage at her own weakness. She felt confusion at the strange emptiness that had followed her departure from Toji and their child. She felt longing. The admission, even to herself, was almost physically painful. The stars above seemed to mock her indecision, their eternal constancy highlighting her recent emotional chaos. They had witnessed her conquests across countless worlds, had illuminated the destruction of entire civilizations at her command. Now they watched as she struggled with something as primitive as attachment. "Pathetic," she hissed, her tail lashing against the throne side. "What is pathetic, daughter?" The deep, cultured voice startled her, though she allowed no visible reaction to show. King Cold had entered silently, his massive form somehow moving with perfect grace despite his imposing stature. At nearly 9 feet tall, he dominated even the spacious observatory, his polished bio-armor gleaming in the starlight. "Father," Frieza acknowledged, straightening in her throne. "I didn't hear you enter." Cold moved forward, his footsteps deliberately audible now. "You were deep in thought. The observatory has always been your refuge when troubled, even when you were a child. A child in age, that is." He joined her, standing beside the throne and looking up at the stars. His presence filled the massive room, somehow making it feel smaller than it is. "Do you remember," he continued, his voice softer than one might expect from such an imposing figure, "how you used to name the constellations? You created entire mythologies for them, tales of conquest and glory." Childish fancies, Frieza dismissed, though the memory stirred something within her. "Perhaps," Cold conceded. "Yet even then, your imagination surpassed your brother's. Cooler saw only strategic positions and resource opportunities. You saw possibilities." A moment of silence passed between them, not uncomfortable but filled with unspoken words and thoughts. Cold broke it by asking, "Are the preparations for Toji Fushiguro's arrival complete?" Frieza's tail twitched, a subtle tell that didn't escape her father's notice. "The palace staff has been instructed. Quarters have been prepared in the royal wing, as you requested." "And the heirs' accommodations?" "A nursery has been established adjacent to the father's quarters," Frieza replied tersely. "Tutors and attendants have been selected from our most loyal subjects." Cold nodded, satisfied. "Excellent." And what of your own preparations, daughter? How will you greet the father of your child? I have nothing to say to him, Frieza stated coldly. No? Cold raised an eyebrow. After sharing a month on a distant world? After creating life together? After abandoning them both? Frieza rose from her throne, moving to the edge of the observatory where the floor met the open air. I did not abandon anyone. I simply returned to my rightful place. And left them to die. He is perfectly capable of survival, Frieza snapped. As you well know, given your insistence on bringing him here. Cold studied his daughter's rigid posture, noting the tension in her shoulders. Why did you flee, Frieza? It isn't like you to run from anything. I did not flee, she insisted, her voice dangerously low. I made a strategic withdrawal to reassess the situation. Is that what we're calling it now? Cold's lips curved in a small smile. Very well. Have you completed your strategic reassessment? Frieza turned sharply, changing the subject. The Arcturian rebellion has been suppressed. Their leadership has been publicly executed as you ordered. The Eastern Quadrant reports a 12% increase in resource extraction this cycle. Cold allowed the deflection, moving to examine one of the holographic displays. Impressive. And what of the new hyperspace corridor through the Cygna sector? Has construction begun? The slave labor force arrived 3 days ago. Work proceeds on schedule. They continued discussing administrative matters for several minutes, Cold subtly steering the conversation back toward personal matters. The child, Megumi, I believe his name is from Salza's reports, right? At this question Frieza's eyes narrowed for but an instant she didn't know if she liked the name. Blessing, it seems TOJI has called their son, she found out from the database of Earth's languages. Cold broke her thoughts as he continued speaking. The boy represents something unprecedented in our history. Frieza tensed. What do you mean? A hybrid of our species has never before existed, Cold explained, his scientific curiosity evident. The genetic implications are fascinating. Will he manifest transformation abilities? Will he inherit your natural power level or develop more gradually like a human? Will he dash? He is not an experiment, Frieza interrupted, surprising herself with the vehemence in her voice. Cold's eyes narrowed slightly, though his expression remained pleasant. Of course not. He is family. Cold dynasty blood flows through his veins, regardless of his hybrid nature. Frieza studied her father, noting the genuine interest in his voice when speaking of Megumi. It unsettled her, this apparent concern for family that seemed so at odds with other aspects of his character. Why don't you seem to care about Cooler's death? She asked suddenly, her tone accusatory. The question hung in the air between them, bold and dangerous. Cold's expression didn't change, but the temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. What makes you think I don't care? He asked quietly. You haven't mentioned him once since I returned, Frieza pressed, emboldened by her father's calm reaction. Your eldest son is dead, killed by a monkey, and you act as if nothing has happened. Not that I myself cared much for Cooler, but all your talk of family above all, it rings hollow when you show no grief for your own child. Cold moved to stand directly before the Starscape, his silhouette massive against the backdrop of space. For a long moment, he said nothing, his tail moving in slow behind him. Death, he finally said, his voice contemplative, is not what most beings believe it to be. Frieza frowned. What do you mean? In my long life, Cold continued, I have studied many things. Ancient texts from civilizations long extinct. Religious practices of species we've conquered. Scientific principles beyond what our own researchers dare explore. He turned to face her, his expression serious. Death is not an end, daughter. It is merely a transition to another state of existence. Frieza stared at him, genuinely surprised. You believe in an afterlife? In souls? I don't merely believe, Cold replied with absolute certainty. I know. The soul continues. The body is but a vessel, temporary and replaceable. Frieza had never heard her father speak this way, though she herself believed in some form of afterlife. Having heard enough consistent accounts from conquered worlds to accept its probability, especially with the existence of the Dragon Balls, she hadn't expected such philosophical views from him. Is that why you don't mourn Cooler? She asked, because you believe he still exists somewhere. Cooler's death was... Cold paused, choosing his words carefully, a necessary lesson. One he needed to experience. Frieza's eyes widened. You speak as if you planned it. Not planned, Cold corrected. Anticipated. Your brother's arrogance had grown unchecked for too long. He needed to understand the consequences of underestimating his opponents. So you just let him die. Frieza's voice rose slightly. For a lesson? I let him face the natural consequences of his choices, Cold replied calmly. As I would for you, should you make similar mistakes. The casual way he discussed Cooler's death disturbed Frieza deeply. It was cold, detached. Even by her standards. Cooler and her had planned to kill each other eventually, both not hiding this fact, but it was still driven with respect and passion. Her father spoke as if Cooler was inconsequential, an insect that needed to learn its place. Just admit it, she said, her voice hardening. You don't truly care about either of us. We're just extensions of yourself, tools for your dynasty. She took a step closer, emboldened by her rising anger. If either of us had ever truly threatened your power, you would have eliminated us without hesitation. All this talk of family is merely convenient rhetoric to maintain control. Cold turned from the stars to face her directly, his expression unreadable. When he spoke, his voice was calm. If power were my only concern, daughter, neither you nor your brother would have lived past your first breath. Frieza blinked, confused. What do you mean? You were born with a power level of 120 million, Cold stated matter-of-factly. Cooler with 90 million. Do you know what my birth power level was? When Frieza didn't respond, he continued, 70 million. Both of my children were born stronger than I was. The revelation stunned Frieza. She had always assumed her father's natural strength exceeded her own or was at least equal to hers, that his position at the top of their hierarchy was the natural order. But your power level dash, she began. Is 120 million according to official records, Cold finished for her. The same as yours at birth. Frieza's mind raced. If Cold had been born weaker than both his children, how had he maintained dominance? The answer was obvious, yet so contrary to their species' normal behavior that she had never considered it. You've trained, she whispered, the concept almost foreign to her. Their kind relied on natural power, not developed strength. Training was for lesser beings who needed to compensate for innate weakness. That's why she looked down upon Cooler so much before. Cold didn't confirm or deny this, but his slight smile told her everything. A chill ran down her spine. If her father had trained enough to match her birth power level, what was his true strength after centuries of existence? How much had he hidden from everyone, including his own children? Let me tell you a story. Cold said, moving to sit in a chair that materialized from the floor at his silent command. About my encounter with Lord Beerus. Frieza's eyes widened. She had met the god of destruction once, briefly, and the memory of his mere presence still haunted her. I was young, Cold began, his eyes distant with memory. Perhaps a century into my conquests. I had already established dominion over several galaxies and believed myself invincible. The scene shifted in Frieza's mind as her father's words painted the picture, a younger King Cold, arrogant and powerful, standing before the feline deity on a now-forgotten world. I challenged him, Cold continued, a hint of self-deprecation in his tone. Can you imagine? I actually believed I could defeat a god of destruction. What happened? Frieza asked, despite herself. He didn't even stand up, Cold replied, his voice hollow with the memory. He remained seated, eating some delicacy from that world, and with a single finger dash, Cold raised his own index finger in demonstration. He brought me to my knees. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move. My power meant nothing. Frieza had never heard this story before. She had assumed her father's deference to Beerus was simply intellectual understanding of strength and nothing more. Not that he truly experienced the consequences of facing it. When he finally released me, Cold continued, he said something I've never forgotten. Power without knowledge is like a ship without a rudder, impressive but ultimately directionless. Cold's expression grew more intense. That day changed everything for me. I realized there were beings in this universe that could threaten even our family, forces beyond our comprehension. My pursuit of strength, of knowledge, of expansion, it all serves one purpose. Ensuring the Cold dynasty survives whatever comes. Is that why you want TOJI? Frieza asked. Another powerful piece for your collection. He is the father of my grandson, Cold replied simply, and possesses potential equal to yours. Such strength should be part of our family, not opposed to it. And if I don't want him? Frieza challenged. Then that is your will, but he will still be here. You will still marry him. Cold said with a shrug. The child also will be raised here, as befits his heritage. Whether you participate in that raising is up to you. Frieza turned away, unwilling to confront him over his words, knowing doing such to be futile. After a moment, she asked the question that had been forming in her mind since the beginning of their conversation. If death is merely a transition, as you claim, why does it matter if the Cold dynasty survives at all? Why build an empire spanning galaxies if we're all just temporary? Cold's smile deepened, as if she had finally asked the right question. Because, my daughter, with sufficient power and knowledge, the barriers between life and death become meaningless. Frieza stared at him, not comprehending. There are texts, Cold explained, ancient beyond measure, that speak of beings who could traverse the realms of living and dead at will. Who could restore life or take it with equal ease. You believe such beings existed? Frieza asked skeptically. I believe such beings can exist again, Cold replied with absolute conviction. That is the ultimate destiny of the Cold dynasty, to transcend the very concept of mortality. Is that what you meant by a necessary lesson? Frieza asked, beginning to understand. Because you see his death as temporary. Precisely, Cold nodded. I intend to let him remain in hell for a time, to gain perspective, to learn humility. Eventually, when the moment is right, he will return to us. You speak of resurrection as if it's a certainty, Frieza said, both disturbed and intrigued by her father's casual discussion of such powers. Is this why he cared not for the Dragon Balls and didn't mention them even once? Did he see himself above them in capability? With enough power, daughter, anything is possible, Cold replied. Even the gods must follow certain rules. But those who transcend godhood make the rules. Frieza realized her father's ambitions extended far beyond mere galactic conquest. The Cold Empire wasn't the end goal, it was merely a step toward something far greater. Now, Cold said, his tone shifting to one of unexpected gentleness, tell me what you truly fear about your feelings for TOJI and your son. The question caught Frieza completely off guard. I'm not afraid of anything, she stammered, cursing herself for the momentary weakness. Cold studied her, his gaze penetrating. Throughout your life, Frieza, you have destroyed what you couldn't control. Planets, species, individuals, if they represented uncertainty or resistance, you eliminated them. He rose from his seat, moving closer. Your feelings for TOJI and the child represent something you cannot dominate or understand. Rather than face this uncertainty, you fled. That's absurd, Frieza snapped, but the words lacked conviction. Is it? Cold asked softly. You, who have never run from any battle, who have faced down fools considered gods by others without flinching, you fled from your husband and an infant. Not because they threatened your life, but because they threatened your understanding of yourself. Frieza wanted to deny it but found she couldn't. The truth in her father's words struck too deeply. Cold placed a massive hand on her shoulder, a rare physical gesture between them. Love is not weakness, daughter. It is a different kind of strength when properly channeled. Frieza recoiled at the word love, shaking her head vehemently. I do not I have never forbidden you to love your own child, Cold continued as if she hadn't spoken. Nor a husband worthy of you. My warnings against sentiment were always about the weak, those who would drain you, use you, hold you back. Parasites. But family, true family, with power comparable to our own, that is different. Before Frieza could respond, the chamber doors slid open. A palace attendant entered, bowing deeply before speaking. Your Majesties! The ship carrying Lord TOJI has entered the system. They request landing clearance at the palace docking bay. Cold nodded, seemingly pleased. Prepare the formal reception hall. Notify the Imperial Guard and the royal attendants. As the attendant departed, Cold turned back to his daughter. Whatever you choose, remember this. The child is Cold dynasty blood and will be raised accordingly. He will know his heritage, his power, his destiny. And your husband will be your husband. He moved toward the exit, his massive frame silhouetted against the starlight. I intend to welcome TOJI properly as the father of my grandson. You have until their arrival to decide if you will willingly play your role in their future. With that, he departed, leaving Frieza alone with the stars and her thoughts. She remained in the observatory after her father left, moving to the very edge of the open ceiling. From this vantage point, she could see the approaching ship, a sleek vessel bearing the insignia of the former Cooler Force. Somewhere on that ship was TOJI, and with him, their son. The thought sent a surge of conflicting emotions through her: pride, fear, anger, longing. She shook her head, returning to her seat. She closed her eyes, wanting to escape all of this through the bliss of sleep. The command bridge of the Imperial vessel hummed with tension as it approached the throne world. Through the massive viewport, the 7 planets of the Imperial capital system were visible, orbiting a brilliant blue star. The closest planet, the throne world itself, gleamed like a polished gem against the blackness of space. TOJI stood at the center of the bridge, arms crossed, the mechanical breathing of his Vader suit providing a steady rhythm to the otherwise silent room. Megumi floated contentedly in a key bubble beside him, occasionally reaching out toward the colorful displays of the ship's instruments. Everyone, TOJI's voice echoed in the minds of his companions. Final review before we arrive. Goku, who had been fidgeting with his Sai-Yang armor, perked up at the telepathic communication. Do we really need all this formality? Can't we just talk to this cold guy normally? Yes, came the unanimous telepathic response from Vegeta, Nappa, and Bulma. Kakarot, you fool, Vegeta's mental voice carried his trademark disdain. This isn't some backwater gathering. This is the Imperial Court, the center of power for 70% of the known universe. One wrong move, Nappa added grimly, one breach of protocol, and it could be interpreted as an insult. Trust me, you don't want to insult the Cold family at the heart of their power. We are not here for war. Especially since we don't know how powerful Cold really is. Bulma's mental voice carried unmistakable excitement despite her attempt at seriousness. Besides, this is fascinating. We're about to witness alien royal protocols that no human has ever seen before. Think of the anthropological significance. The what now? Goku asked. Never mind, TOJI cut in. Just remember what we discussed. Address King Cold as Your Majesty and Frieza as Your Highness or Tempress. Don't speak unless spoken to. And above all, his mental voice hardened. Remember why we're here. Megumi is the priority. Everything else is secondary. As if sensing he was being discussed, Megumi gurgled happily in his bubble, tiny hands reaching toward his father. A sudden shiver ran through several of the crew members on the bridge. One of them rubbed his arms, breath becoming visible in the increasingly cold air. Commander Salza, a technician, called out, the environmental systems are malfunctioning. Temperature is dropping rapidly. Salza frowned, moving to check the readouts himself. Run a diagnostic, he ordered. This shouldn't be happening. Dor and Knees exchanged concerned glances as they too began to feel the chill. The massive green warrior's breath formed small clouds as he exhaled. System shows normal, he reported. No malfunction detected. Salza's eyes widened slightly as realization dawned. His gaze shifted to the imposing black figure standing motionless at the center of the bridge. The cold wasn't coming from any system failure, it was emanating from Lord TOJI himself. The temperature continued to drop as they approached the throne world. Frost began forming on metal surfaces throughout the ship. But it wasn't just physical cold, there was a pressure, an overwhelming sense of authority that seemed to permeate the very air. We're receiving landing coordinates from the Imperial Palace, the navigation officer announced, voice trembling slightly. Whether from cold or intimidation, it was impossible to tell. Salza straightened his posture, forcing composure. Prepare for final approach, he commanded. Alert all crew members to be ready for landing procedures. As the ship began its descent toward the throne world, nervous energy permeated the vessel. They were about to present their new lord to the true emperor of the universe. Grand Marshal Talon surveyed the ceremonial reception hall with critical eyes. At 10 feet tall with iridescent scales and 4 arms, he cut an imposing figure even among the elite Imperial Royal Guard he commanded. Each of his 4 hands held a different weapon, symbols of his mastery over all forms of combat. The eastern banners are 2 inches too low, he barked, his voice resonating through the cavernous space. Fix them immediately. Servants scrambled to adjust the hanging banners, which displayed the Cold Dynasty emblem. A stylized representation of their family's biogem set against a field of white. The reception hall was a monument to imperial power. Columns carved from materials harvested from 1,000 different worlds supported a ceiling so high it seemed to disappear into shadow. Between the columns stood trophies from conquered civilizations, artifacts, weapons, and occasionally preserved specimens of particularly interesting species. The floor was polished black stone that reflected the light from crystal chandeliers, each containing a miniature star at its center. The effect was both beautiful and intimidating, precisely as intended. A servant approached Talon, bowing deeply. Grand Marshal, His Majesty has requested that the visitors be brought directly to him in the Sovereign Chamber upon arrival. Talon frowned. That bypasses traditional court procedures. The visitors should first be presented to the Imperial Regents, then the High Council. Before His Majesty was most insistent, the servant interrupted, then immediately paled at his own boldness. Talon raised one hand, and the servant flinched. But the Grand Marshal merely stroked his scaled chin thoughtfully. Very well. His Majesty's will supersede protocol. As he turned to issue new orders to his guards, Talon noticed his breath had become visible. The temperature in the reception hall was dropping rapidly, frost forming on the metallic surfaces of the trophies and weapons displays. Check the environmental systems, he commanded a nearby technician. Something is malfunctioning. All systems show normal, Grand Marshal, the technician replied after consulting his device. There's no dash, this is not a malfunction, Talon realized aloud, his hands instinctively tightening on his weapons. This is a demonstration. He had felt such cold only once before, when in the presence of King Cold himself at his most displeased. But this was different, rawer, less controlled, yet equally powerful. They approach, Talon announced to his guards. Show no weakness. The honor of the Imperial Guard is at stake. In his private chamber adjacent to the Sovereign Room, King Cold stood before a holographic display. The projection showed various recorded footage of TOJI Fushiguro. His battle against Frieza on Namek, his casual dismissal of the Jinyu Force, the power readings that had shattered the flagship's equipment. Cold's expression remained unreadable as he studied the data, his massive frame perfectly still except for the occasional swish of his tail. Unlike his children, who often displayed their emotions openly, Cold had mastered the art of the Imperial mask, revealing only what he wished others to see. A servant entered, bowing so low his forehead nearly touched the floor. Your Majesty, the ship has entered the atmosphere. They will be landing momentarily. Cold dismissed the holographic display with a wave of his hand. Very well. I shall receive them in the Sovereign Chamber. As the servant departed, Cold allowed himself a small smile. The temperature in his chamber had been steadily dropping for the past several minutes. An interesting approach from his future son-in-law. Subtle yet unmistakable, announcing his presence through power rather than mere words. Slowing down the movement of the air, through the envelopment of the entire planet in his ki, creating this cold, like he himself sometimes loved to do. Though he preferred to slow down the blood flow, and have the offender feel their organs collapse from the cold and slowly suffocate to death. But this is good, this shows creativity and control. Perhaps this human would truly prove worthy of the Cold Dynasty beyond even his children. The royal landing pad stretched before the massive ship like a welcoming hand. Designed to accommodate vessels 10 times larger than the one currently descending, it featured the Cold Dynasty emblem inlaid in precious metals across its surface. An honor guard of 50 elite warriors stood in perfect formation, their breath forming clouds in the increasingly cold air. Despite their training, several shifted uncomfortably as frost began to form on their armor. With a hiss of hydraulics, the ship settled onto the landing pad. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, with theatrical timing, a ramp extended from the vessel's underside, a red carpet unfurling along its length. Before anyone appeared, the sound of mechanical breathing echoed across the landing pad, a rhythmic, artificial respiration that seemed to fill the space with an ominous feeling. Then a figure appeared at the top of the ramp, tall, imposing, clad entirely in black. The helmet concealed all features, reflecting the light of the blue star overhead. A cape billowed behind him despite the lack of wind, as if moved by some unseen force. Lord TOJI began his descent, each step measured and deliberate. The temperature dropped further with every footfall, frost spreading across the landing pad's surface in his wake. Behind him walked 4 figures in formation. A blue-haired woman in Saiyang armor carrying a small infant, 2 Saiyang warriors in traditional battle gear, and a third Saiyang whose cheerful expression seemed at odds with the solemnness of the situation. At a respectful distance behind them came Salza, Knees, and Door, their heads bowed in deference. As TOJI reached the bottom of the ramp, Grand Marshal Talon stepped forward. Despite towering over the black-clad figure, the 4-armed warrior felt strangely small in his presence. The cold emanating from TOJI was now intense enough that the metal components of Talon's armor had begun to crack from the stress. Lord TOJI, Talon greeted, his voice steady despite his discomfort. I am Grand Marshal Talon, Commander of the Imperial Royal Guard. His Majesty King Cold awaits you in the Sovereign Chamber. The breathing continued for several seconds before TOJI responded, his voice deep and resonant through the modulator. Lead on, Grand Marshal. Talon inclined his head and turned, leading the procession toward the palace. The honor guard fell in behind them, many visibly trembling, whether from cold or fear, it was impossible to tell. The journey through the imperial palace was a deliberate display of the Cold Empire's power and reach. Corridors stretched for what seemed like miles, their walls adorned with artifacts. Ceilings soared to impossible heights, supported by columns carved from very strong materials. Bulma's eyes darted everywhere, mentally cataloguing everything. That appears to be a quantum stabilization field, she telepathically commented to the others as they passed a shimmering barrier. And those lights, they are not using electricity or any fuel source I can identify. Focus, woman, Vegeta's mental voice cut in. The Saiyang prince walked with rigid posture, his eyes constantly scanning for potential threats. Every corridor, every chamber they passed through was assessed for tactical advantages and escape routes. The universe was large. The Jinyu force, though stated to be the most elite force of the Empire, did not mean that was necessarily true. King Cold was the most unknown being in the Empire, whether perhaps he had his own elite squad was unknown. But it was something Vegeta took into account anyway. Goku, meanwhile, struggled to maintain the formal demeanor Vegeta had drilled into him during their journey. His natural inclination to wave at passing servants or comment on interesting sights was suppressed only through constant reminders from the others. "This place is huge," he mentally exclaimed. "How does anyone find their way around?" "It's designed to be confusing," Nappa explained, surprising everyone with his insight. "Makes it harder for assassins to navigate." The Cold family is not in the mood to constantly have to kill intruders. They want them dead before they even get close. I heard rumors about it during my time in Frieza's army before planet Vegeta was destroyed. At the last words, Nappa's hands clenched in a fist, his mental words full of rage and bitterness. The honor guards took note of it, deciding to keep an eye on him. As they progressed deeper into the palace, guards and courtiers dropped to one knee as Toji passed. The mechanical breathing and the cold aura that accompanied him had spread his reputation ahead of the procession. Megumi, cradled in Bulma's arms, both of them protected in a key barrier by Toji from the cold and any possible attack, seemed fascinated by the spectacle. His violet eyes tracked the movement of light across surfaces, occasionally reaching toward particularly shiny objects. Finally, they reached a corridor that ended in massive obsidian doors. Inlaid within the black stone were bio-gems identical to those on Frieza's form. "The Sovereign Chamber," Grand Marshal Talon announced, his four hands performing a complex gesture that caused the massive doors to swing open silently. Beyond lay a chamber of impossible vastness, so large that its far walls were barely visible, lost in the atmosphere that filled the upper reaches of the room. The ceiling appeared to be open to space itself, the blue star of the system visible directly overhead. And there, seated upon a throne of black crystal that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, was King Cold. Even seated, the king's presence dominated the chamber. His bio-armor gleamed with mirror polish, his horns curved majestically from his head. His tail lay coiled beside the throne, occasionally twitching subtly with movement. As Toji entered, Cold did something unexpected. He rose to his feet. The gesture was not lost on the imperial courtiers who lined the walls of the chamber, their gasps audible even across the vast space. The king stood for no one. Toji advanced alone, his companions remaining at the entrance as instructed. The mechanical breathing echoed throughout the chamber as he approached the throne, stopping at precisely the correct distance, not so close as to seem presumptuous, not so far as to appear fearful. For a long moment, the two simply regarded each other, Cold looking down from his impressive height, Toji's mask revealing nothing of his thoughts. "Lord Toji Fushiguro," Cold finally spoke, "welcome to the imperial capital." "Your Majesty," Toji replied, inclining his head slightly, a show of respect without submission. "I accept your welcome." Cold's lips curved in what might have been amusement. "Few beings stand before me without trembling, Lord Toji." Fewer still maintain their composure while doing so. Your reputation for boldness appears well deserved. I see no reason to fear that which I respect, Your Majesty, TOJI responded. Cold gestured to a servant, who approached bearing a crystalline decanter containing a luminescent blue liquid. Celestial nectar, from the Andromeda Galaxy, Cold explained. A traditional welcome for honored guests. Your Majesty honors me, TOJI replied. However, I must respectfully decline. My current attire makes consumption impractical. Cold studied the mask for a moment, then nodded. A practical consideration. I respect your commitment to your chosen presentation. He dismissed the servant with a wave. Tell me, how fares my grandson? I understand Frost Demon and human physiologies have never before been combined. His development must be fascinating to observe. TOJI considered his response carefully. He sensed no malice in Cold's question, only genuine interest. Megumi develops rapidly, Your Majesty. His strength already exceeds what would be expected of a human infant. He requires specialized nutrition, standard human milk or formula I believe would prove insufficient. Indeed, Cold nodded. Frost Demon infants typically consume foods high in specific mineral compounds. I would be pleased to provide information that might assist in his proper development. Such information would be appreciated, TOJI acknowledged. He had decided before arriving that when it came to Megumi's well-being, pride would take a back seat to practicality. May I see him? Cold requested, his tone softer than before. TOJI hesitated only briefly before turning toward the entrance. With a gesture, he summoned Bulma forward. She approached at a pace not fast nor slow, Megumi cradled protectively in her arms. When she reached TOJI's side, Cold did something that shocked everyone present. He inclined his head toward TOJI in a subtle bow. With your permission, Lord TOJI, I would like to hold my grandson. The request, phrased as a request rather than a command, represented an unprecedented show of deference from the king. Courtiers along the walls exchanged astonished glances. TOJI nodded once, again sensing no ill intent from his key. You may. Bulma carefully transferred Megumi to Cold's massive hands. Despite his imposing size, the king handled the infant with gentleness, supporting his head properly as he cradled him. He has her eyes, Cold observed, studying Megumi's violet irises. The infant, far from being frightened by the massive being holding him, reached curiously for the bio-gems on Cold's armor. Cold smiled, a genuine expression rather than the calculated one he typically displayed. Good. He shows no fear. Fear is useful in subjects, but not in family. He returned his attention to TOJI. Frost Demon development differs significantly from humans. He will begin speaking within months, walking shortly thereafter. By his first year, he will require formal education befitting his heritage. I intend to ensure he receives education appropriate to both sides of his heritage, TOJI stated firmly. He will know of his Frost Demon lineage, but will primarily experience that of Earth and humanity. My son will be raised how I want him to be raised. I'll allow him to know his mother, I won't deprive him from that, but he is mine. I decide what I find suitable for him. TOJI thought to himself. That being the intent behind his words. An acceptable approach, Cold agreed, surprising TOJI with his ready acceptance, Cold himself clearly seeing through TOJI's hidden meaning. Diversity of knowledge can be a strength when properly channeled. I'll make sure to aid in that. For everyone should know as much as one possibly can. Knowledge is the lifeblood of advancement. Acceptable. You may raise him wherever you want, however you want. It is your right as the father. But I will make sure he still knows what I want him to know, and I want him to know everything, so that eventually he can make his own decisions. No perspective hidden. Only fools hide from knowledge, the king thought to himself, it being the intent behind his response. TOJI slowly nodded in response, also understanding what is intended to be said. That is, acceptable, his own intent behind his nod. Cold returned Megumi to Bulma, who stepped back to her previous position. Now, the Emperor continued, let us discuss your position within the Empire. As father to my grandson, you are entitled to significant status. I propose the title of Lord Protector of the Eastern Quadrant, the territories formerly under my son Cooler's jurisdiction. And what would this position entail? TOJI asked. Authority over approximately 20% of the Empire, Cold replied. Including military command, resource allocation, and governance of several hundred inhabited worlds. Bulma stepped forward again, this time without Megumi, who had been handed to Goku. If I may, Your Majesty, she began, her voice steady despite the intimidating situation. Lord TOJI has specific conditions regarding any position within the Empire. Cold raised an eyebrow but nodded permission for her to continue. You are? Bulma briefs, Your Majesty. Chief Scientific Advisor to Lord TOJI and heiress to Earth's most advanced technological corporation. Proceed, Advisor briefs, Cold permitted, seeming intrigued by her boldness. Bulma unfolded a digital tablet. First, Earth must remain under Lord TOJI's direct protection, exempt from imperial taxation and military conscription. Second, Lord TOJI requires operational autonomy. His decisions within his territory cannot be overridden except by direct order from Your Majesty personally, and that only after thorough discussion to see Lord TOJI's perspective beforehand. As Bulma continued listing conditions, ranging from resource allocation to military deployment rights, Cold listened attentively. His expression revealed nothing, but his tail occasionally twitched with what might have been amusement. Third, Bulma continued, regarding the heir, Megumi Fushiguro. His education will be supervised jointly by Lord TOJI and appropriate imperial tutors, with Lord TOJI maintaining veto power over curriculum. Megumi will split his time between Earth and the imperial capital until he reaches maturity. And what of the Empress's role in the child's upbringing? Cold inquired. Here TOJI spoke directly. If the Empress wishes involvement in our son's life, she must approach as a mother to her child, not as an empress to a subject. Megumi's well-being transcends imperial hierarchy. The chamber fell silent at this bold statement. Several courtiers appeared on the verge of fainting at such directness toward the royal family. Cold studied TOJI for a long moment, then surprised everyone by chuckling. Direct and unyielding where your son is concerned. As it should be. He turned to Bulma. Continue, Advisor. Bulma proceeded through several more conditions, including technological exchange protocols, judicial independence, and even cultural preservation guarantees for worlds under TOJI's jurisdiction. When she finished, she stepped back and took back Megumi in her arms. Cold nodded thoughtfully after hearing everything. Comprehensive and well-reasoned. Your advisor serves you admirably, Lord TOJI. She does, TOJI agreed simply. I find your conditions acceptable, Cold declared. The Eastern Quadrant shall be yours to govern as Lord Protector, with the autonomy you request. Earth shall remain under your direct protection, and your authority regarding the heir's upbringing shall be respected. TOJI inclined his head in acknowledgement. Your Majesty is generous. Not generous, Cold corrected. Practical. The Cold Empire has expanded through strength, yes, but also through strategic alliances and recognition of mutual benefit. You possess power worthy of respect, and your son carries our bloodline. Our interests are aligned. Before TOJI could respond, the massive obsidian doors swung open without announcement. All heads turned toward the entrance. Frieza stood in the doorway, her fifth form resplendent in royal garments that complemented her bio-armor. Her white hair flowed freely around her shoulders, and her violet eyes, identical to Megumi's, surveyed the chamber with imperial hauteur. Everyone except Toji, Cold, Vegeta, Nappa, Bulma, and Goku immediately dropped to one knee. Goku remained standing out of simple confusion about protocol, while Vegeta and Nappa stayed upright out of sheer hatred for their former tormentor. Bulma refused to kneel before the woman who had abandoned her child and stolen Toji's heart, whether she admitted it to herself or not. As Frieza entered, her eyes immediately locked onto Megumi in Bulma's arms. For the briefest moment, her imperial mask slipped, revealing a complex mixture of emotions, surprise, longing, and then unmistakable jealousy at seeing another woman holding her child. The flash of emotion was gone almost instantly, her face becoming an impassive royal visage once more. She approached the throne with measured steps, deliberately ignoring Toji's presence. "Father," she greeted Cold formally, inclining her head. "Daughter," Cold responded, his tone revealing nothing. "You honor us with your presence." Frieza's gaze finally turned to Toji, her eyes moving slowly from his boots up to his mask. "What?" she asked, her voice dripping with practiced disdain. "Is that ridiculous contraption you're wearing, Toji?" A tense silence followed her casual use of his name without title, a deliberate breach of etiquette that everyone present recognized immediately. "Your Highness finds my attire displeasing?" Toji responded formally, the breathing filling the pause between his words. Frieza circled him slowly, examining the Vader suit with a critical eye. "It looks like you've been swallowed by a particularly tasteless garbage compactor," she remarked, trailing one finger along his cape. "The breathing apparatus is especially absurd. Are your lungs so weak they require mechanical assistance?" "On the contrary," Toji countered, "the suit serves its purpose admirably. Its intimidation factor has proven most effective. Not unlike your Highness's own carefully cultivated appearance. Woman, you yourself literally have a 2 feet tall form, because you need to compensate for how short you are compared to me and everyone else included. What are you even blabbering about? I can dress however I want," was basically what Toji was saying. Frieza's eyes narrowed slightly. "Are you suggesting my form is merely for show, Lord Toji?" The title came with subtle mockery. "Are you calling me short?" "How dare you," was essentially her response behind the formal speech. "I would never presume to suggest anything about your Highness's appearance," Toji replied smoothly as he looked down at her 5 feet 8 inches from his 6 feet 6 inches with the helmet on. "Merely observing that presentation is a tool we both employ." "Yeah, you are. Look, I'm literally looking down at you." "And what exactly are you presenting yourself as?" Frieza asked, completing her circle around him. "Some sort of mechanical monstrosity. At least I'm not compensating intimidation points with some ugly suit." "A figure of authority," Toji answered. "One who commands respect through presence rather than merely demanding it. Please, it's awesome and everyone knows it. You're the one with no taste." Their exchange continued, each response more personal than the last. The formal court speech gradually slipped into their familiar pattern of verbal sparring, a dance of words that was basically flirting, which everyone could recognize. "I see your time on Earth has done nothing to improve your fashion sense," Frieza commented, her tail swishing behind her. "And I see your time in the palace has done nothing to improve your manners," Toji retorted, the mechanical voice somehow conveying dry amusement. The courtiers watched with increasing discomfort, sensing the obvious tension between them. Bulma held Megumi protectively, uncertain of Frieza's intentions toward the child. King Cold finally intervened, his voice cutting through their exchange. "I believe Lord Toji's attire is quite appropriate for his new position." The emphasis on Lord Toji was subtle but unmistakable, a reminder to Frieza about proper protocol. Even as Empress, there were standards of respect to be maintained, particularly toward one worthy of that respect. The presentation of power, Cold continued, is often as important as power itself. Lord Toji understands this principle well. Frieza recognized her lapse in etiquette, or at least, recognized her father's disapproval of it. She quickly corrected herself, her tone shifting back to formal court speech. Of course, father. Lord Toji's choices are his own. She inclined her head slightly toward Toji. I meant no disrespect. The lie was transparent to everyone present, but Cold chose to accept it with a nod. King Cold moved from his position, immediately commanding attention. I believe our guests have had a long journey, he announced, his voice carrying effortlessly across the chamber. They should be allowed to rest and refresh themselves before further ceremonies. He gestured to a high-ranking attendant who immediately stepped forward. See that Lord Toji and his companions are escorted to their quarters in the royal wing. Ensure they have everything they require. Yes, Your Majesty, the attendant replied with a deep bow. Cold turned to Toji. Tomorrow, we shall formally present you to the Imperial Court. For now, make yourselves comfortable. The palace is at your disposal. Your hospitality is appreciated, Your Majesty, Toji responded. As the attendants prepared to lead Toji's group away, Cold added casually, Daughter, perhaps you would like to show Lord Toji the royal gardens. They are particularly beautiful under our star's evening light. Frieza's tail twitched slightly. The only outward sign of her surprise at the suggestion. Of course, father, she replied smoothly, though her eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly. If Lord Toji wishes it. All eyes turned to Toji, the expressionless mask revealing nothing of his thoughts. After a moment of silence filled only by his breathing, he inclined his head. It would be an honor, Your Highness. Cold smiled, satisfaction evident in his eyes. Excellent. The rest of your companions will be shown to their chambers. He turned to Bulma, who still held Megumi. Advisor briefs, the nursery has been prepared adjacent to Lord Toji's quarters. The royal caretakers will assist with anything the heir requires. Bulma hesitated, glancing at Toji. At his subtle nod, she replied, Thank you, Your Majesty. As the group began to disperse, Cold's voice stopped them once more. One final matter. A formal banquet will be held tomorrow evening to celebrate Lord Toji's appointment and the official recognition of the heir. Attendance is mandatory. The dismissal was clear. Courtiers bowed deeply as Cold swept from the chamber, his massive frame moving with surprising grace for his size. Left alone with Frieza, Toji stood motionless, the mechanical breathing the only sound between them. Neither spoke. Finally, Frieza turned toward one of the side exits. The gardens are this way, she stated simply, not looking back to see if he followed. Toji remained still for a moment longer, then moved after her, his cape billowing behind him as they departed the chamber together. The royal garden of the imperial capital stretched out beneath 3 full moons. Their combined light cast everything in a silver-blue glow, transforming the exotic flora into sculptures of light and shadow. Toji Fushiguro stood motionless, his black Vader suit absorbing the moonlight while his cape billowed dramatically in the gentle night breeze. Beside him, Frieza waited, her white coat flowing over her bio-armor, creating a stark contrast to Toji's darkness. The only sound between them was the steady, rhythmic breathing emanating from Toji's helmet, mechanical, measured, unnatural. It had been this way for nearly 10 minutes now, neither speaking, simply standing side by side as if waiting for the other to break first. Frieza's tail twitched with growing irritation. The Empress of the Universe was not accustomed to being ignored, especially not by someone who should, by all rights, be groveling for her attention. Take off that ridiculous helmet, she finally demanded, her voice cutting through the silence like a blade. Toji remained motionless for a long moment, the mechanical breathing continuing uninterrupted. Then, with deliberate slowness, he turned his head toward her, the expressionless mask revealing nothing of his thoughts or emotions. Why should I? The modulated voice carried a hint of challenge. Frieza's eyes narrowed, her lips curling into a disbelieving sneer. "Because I demand it," she replied, as if stating the most obvious fact in the universe. "Is your hearing as defective as that breathing apparatus?" "I refuse." The words came flat and final. "Excuse me." Frieza's tail lashed behind her, her composure cracking slightly at his defiance. "You do not deserve to speak to me face to face," TOJI continued, his stance unwavering. "Nor do you deserve to look into my eyes directly." Frieza's mouth opened slightly in shock before quickly hardening into a scowl. "How dare you dash, how dare I?" TOJI interrupted, his voice somehow conveying his emotions. "How dare you abandon our son? How dare you say you would have killed him in the womb if your powers had returned earlier?" The accusation hung in the air between them, heavy and unavoidable. "Those words," TOJI continued, his voice growing harder with each syllable. "I could have forgiven almost anything else. Your further attempts to kill me afterwards? Childish. Your insults? Meaningless. Had you been loyal to us, to me and Megumi? Had you been there for us, I would have accepted you, flaws and all." Frieza's expression remained frozen, her usual quick retorts nowhere to be found. "But what you did, what you said about our son, that is something I cannot forgive." TOJI's hands clenched at his sides. "Especially since you've never taken those words back. You stand there proudly, as if they were inconsequential." The night wind picked up, causing TOJI's cape to billow more dramatically around him. "No," he continued, his voice dropping lower. "You will not see my face. This face that you yourself once liked seeing. You will not hear the warmth in my voice. You do not deserve to see the man who loves you." At this admission, Frieza's eyes widened, genuine shock registering on her features. The word "loves" echoed in her mind. TOJI stood motionless, waiting for her to say something, anything. To apologize. To say she loved him too. To take back those cruel words about Megumi. To express any desire to be a mother to their child. But Frieza remained speechless, frozen in place, her mind racing with thoughts she couldn't seem to organize into coherent speech. After what felt like an eternity, TOJI turned away, his shoulders set with finality. He began walking, each step deliberate, the sound of his boots on the garden path seeming to echo with permanence. Something cold gripped Frieza's heart as she watched him leave. This wasn't like their battles, their games of dominance and submission. This felt final. As if he were walking out of her life forever. He and her son would be lost to her forever. She couldn't accept that. She wouldn't. Wait! The word burst from her lips before she could stop it, louder and more desperate than she'd intended. TOJI stopped but didn't turn around, his back to her, cape settling around his form as the wind momentarily calmed. "Why?" His modulated voice carried across the garden. "Why should I wait?" Frieza opened her mouth, but no words came. It was as if her body was rebelling against her mind, her tongue refusing to form the words her heart was screaming. After a long silence filled only with his mechanical breathing, TOJI began walking again. "Just listen," Frieza called out, her voice cracking slightly. TOJI stopped once more, but this time he turned. In 3 long strides, he was back before her, his movements charged with barely contained fury. His hand shot out, grabbing her wrist and yanking her toward him. "Tell me why," he demanded, his masked face inches from hers. "Give me one reason why I should wait for you. Why I should listen to anything you have to say." Frieza stared up at him, her violet eyes wide with an emotion she'd never experienced before, uncertainty. Her usual imperial composure had crumbled, leaving her vulnerable and exposed. "Because I love you." The words tumbled out, confused, surprising them both. Toji's grip on her wrist loosened immediately. His hands dropped to his sides as silence fell between them, broken only by the steady rhythm of his mechanical breathing. Frieza felt something warm slide down her cheek. Confused, she reached up with her free hand, touching the wetness and examining the moisture on her fingertips with bewilderment. A tear! She was crying. A long silence settled between them. She began, her voice uncharacteristically soft. I love you. And it terrifies me. She took a shaky breath, struggling to articulate feelings she'd never before acknowledged, even to herself. I've never feared anything in my life, she continued. Not my father. Not my brother. Not death. Not failure. But this feeling, it's like nothing I've ever experienced. Toji remained silent, listening. I was born with power that made me untouchable, Frieza explained, her gaze dropping to the ground. Everything I ever wanted was mine for the taking. Everyone I ever met either feared me or sought to use me. But you challenged me. You matched me. You saw me. Another tear slipped down her cheek. When I realized I cared for you, for Megumi, it felt like I discovered a weakness in myself. A vulnerability that could be exploited. I've spent centuries destroying weaknesses, eliminating vulnerabilities. And suddenly there was this feeling I couldn't control. She looked up at him, her eyes shining with tears she'd never shed before. I'm afraid, she admitted, the words feeling foreign on her tongue. I'm not used to fear. I'm not used to loving someone, to fearing I might lose someone I love. I've always been in control, never having to worry about others. Her voice dropped to nearly a whisper. I need time. I need you to wait. To wait for me. Toji stood there silently, watching her, looking almost through her for a long moment. His hands moved to his helmet. With a series of clicks and a soft hiss, he removed it, encasing it in a bubble of ki that floated behind him. His face, no longer hidden, revealed dark eyes filled with a mixture of pain and hope. Frieza, he said, his voice now his own, warm, deep, human. He reached out with both hands, gently cupping her face and using his thumbs to wipe away her tears. Then, with unexpected tenderness, he leaned down and pressed his lips softly against the skin beneath each eye, kissing away the tear tracks. Frieza froze at the gentle touch, a sensation so foreign it sent shivers through her entire body. No one had ever touched her with gentleness before. Lesser creatures weren't permitted to touch her at all, and her family had never been affectionate. In battle, there was only violence, never this softness. She found herself leaning into his touch, craving more of this new sensation. I don't like seeing you cry, Toji said, his eyes sad as he pulled back slightly to look at her. Frieza struggled, unused to explaining herself. I'm afraid. I need you to understand that. I need time to accept these feelings. Toji ran his fingers through her silky white hair, the gentleness of his touch making her shiver again. I'll wait, he promised softly. I've been waiting already. There hasn't been a moment since you left that I wasn't thinking of you, aware of you. I've kept you within my sensing range constantly, extending it when you went beyond its normal limits, even when it hurt to stretch it that far. He pulled her closer, wrapping his arms around her. I'll wait for you to accept your love for us. For me and Megumi, and to push past your fear of doing so. Frieza allowed herself to be held against his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart. For a long moment, she relaxed into his embrace, experiencing a peace she'd never known before. Then a memory flashed in her mind, the blue-haired woman in the throne room, holding Megumi in her arms with such familiarity, such ease. Frieza stiffened and pulled away from Toji's embrace. How can I be sure, she asked, her voice hardening. Toji looked at her in confusion. Sure of what? That you won't leave me, Frieza clarified, her eyes narrowing. That you won't betray me and go with someone else. Her voice turned bitter as she continued, You're clearly getting close to that blue-haired woman. She held our son in her arms the entire time during the Imperial meeting. Your oh-so-great advisor. Toji stared at her for a moment before a chuckle escaped him. There's nothing between me and Bulma, he assured her. She's just a friend who's helping me. How can I be certain? Frieza pressed, her tail lashing behind her. Because I won't accept you being with anyone else. If you do, I'll kill that woman and then you for betraying me. Toji's laughter deepened as he reached out, cupping her chin. His smile transformed from gentle to predatory, a look Frieza was far more familiar with. The feeling is mutual, he said, his voice dropping to a dangerous purr. If you betray me, I'll kill you and whoever you went with. I won't allow anyone else to have you. His grip on her chin tightened slightly. You are mine. Their eyes locked, a familiar hunger passing between them. In an instant, they were kissing passionately, Frieza's arms locking behind Toji's head as she reached up to him. His hands gripped her waist, pulling her body flush against his own. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing heavily, their eyes still locked. You can be sure I'll never betray you, Toji said, his voice husky. But if you want to be completely at ease, you should try to sense me. Frieza looked at him in confusion. Sense you? Key sense isn't inherent to humans, Toji explained. It's a skill that can be learned. You can do it too. Just try. It's like a radar, push out your key and try to know what is within it. How? Frieza asked, genuinely curious. Close your eyes, Toji instructed. Focus on your energy, then extend it outward, like ripples in a pond. Don't force it, let it flow naturally. Frieza closed her eyes, concentrating. At first, there was nothing, just the darkness behind her eyelids. Then, gradually, she began to feel something. A presence, warm and powerful, directly in front of her, Toji. As she focused more, other sensations emerged, the subtle life force of the plants, the air, the distant signatures of creatures, in the palace, everything. I can feel you, she whispered, opening her eyes in wonder. This way, you'll always know where I am, Toji said. You'll always feel what I'm doing. You'll know what I'm feeling. There can be no secrets, no betrayals. They stood together under the 3 moons, the silver light bathing them in an ethereal glow. After a long moment, Toji brought her hand to his lips and placed a gentle kiss on her knuckles. I have to go, he said reluctantly. It's getting late. Toji retrieved his helmet from its key bubble and began putting it back on. Frieza watched him, a part of her wanting to ask him to come with her, to spend the night together, but something held her back, a remnant of her old pride, perhaps, or lingering uncertainty about these new, overwhelming feelings. The helmet clicked into place, and the mechanical breathing resumed. With a final nod, Toji turned and walked away, his cape billowing behind him as he disappeared into the shadows of the royal garden. Frieza remained alone beneath the 3 moons, her fingers gently touching the spots beneath her eyes where Toji had kissed her tears away, the first act of gentleness she had ever received from another being. The sensation lingered on her skin, a memory her body seemed unwilling to forget. And in the silence of the garden, the Empress of the Universe stood contemplating not conquest or destruction, but the unfamiliar territory of love. The grand ceremonial hall of the Imperial Palace stretched very, very far. Its vast ceiling lost in atmospheric haze, its walls so distant they appeared as mere suggestions on the horizon. Crystalline chandeliers containing miniature artificial stars illuminated the space lit up the place. Lord Toji Fushiguro stood at the entrance, a pillar of darkness against the opulent splendor. His Darth Vader regalia absorbed light rather than reflected it, the mechanical breathing apparatus providing a steady, ominous rhythm that seemed to resonate through the vast chamber. The black cape billowed behind him without any perceptible breeze, as if moved by the sheer force of his presence. Behind him stood his entourage, Vegeta and Nappa in formal Saiyang armor, Goku looking uncomfortable but impressive in his own attire, and Bulma resplendent in a gown that complemented her Saiyang armor while still maintaining her own ways of fashion. The Imperial Court recognizes Lord Toji Fushiguro, Lord Protector of the Eastern Quadrant and father to the Imperial heir, announced a court herald, his voice key amplified to reach every corner of the immense hall. As Toji began his measured advance, the assembled court members, hundreds of the most powerful beings in the galaxy, dropped to one knee in waves, creating a rippling effect of submission that spread outward from his path. King Cold awaited him at the far end, seated upon an obsidian throne that seemed to devour light. To his right, on a slightly smaller throne, sat Frieza in her fifth form, her white hair cascading over a long white coat that complemented her bio-armor. Between them, in a specially constructed cradle of precious metals and crystals, lay Megumi, the focus of much of the evening's ceremony. "This is ridiculous," Vegeta's telepathic voice grumbled to their private mental link. "The pomp, the ceremony, it's all designed to reinforce their supposed superiority. Like we are in need of them." "I think it's fascinating," Bulma countered mentally. "The Is anyone else hungry?" Goku interrupted. "I smell something amazing coming from those tables." "Kakarot, focus!" Vegeta snapped. "This isn't a buffet." Toji's mental voice cut through their bickering. "Enough. Remember why we're here." As they reached the central area, King Cold rose from his throne, an honor that sent murmurs rippling through the assembly. The Emperor never stood for anyone. "Lord Toji Fushiguro," Cold announced, his voice carrying effortlessly across the vast space, "we welcome you formally to the Imperial Court as Lord Protector of the Eastern Quadrant, third power of the Empire, and father to the heir of the Cold Dynasty." The mechanical breathing filled the momentary silence before Toji responded, his voice deepened and altered by the modulator. "I am honored by your Majesty's welcome and accept the responsibilities of my position." Cold gestured toward Megumi. "Today we also formally recognize Megumi Fushiguro as heir to the Cold Dynasty, fourth in the line of our illustrious bloodline." The assembled court members raised their voices in a ritualistic response, "Hail to the heir! May his reign be glorious!" As the formalities concluded, Cold announced, "Let the celebration commence." Music filled the air. Servants appeared with trays of exotic foods and beverages, offering them to the guests as they mingled. "Lord Toji," a voice called, and he turned to find himself facing a towering, four-armed reptilian being adorned in gleaming armor. "I once again formally introduce myself. I am Grand Marshal Talon, Supreme Commander of the Imperial Military Forces. It is an honor to meet the warrior who matched the Empress in combat." The mechanical breathing continued for 2 cycles before Toji responded, "Grand Marshal. Your reputation precedes you." "Like hell it does. I don't even know you besides that last time we met, but then I didn't really care to focus." "Still, it's the correct and probably true thing to say," thought Toji to himself. Talon's scales shifted color slightly, betraying his pleasure at the recognition. "The tales of your power have spread throughout the Empire, my lord. They say you halted the Empress's death beam with your bare hand, a feat previously thought impossible." "The force of Ki is strong with me," Toji replied. "I kind of wish Gohan was here, he'd love these references I'm making." Before Talon could respond, a crystalline being approached, her facete body refracting light in beautiful patterns. "Lord Toji," she began, her voice creating musical tones with each word and speeding up with each word, "I am Lady Crystal Lees, Imperial High Chancellor. I've prepared 17 different diplomatic strategies for your integration into the court, though I fear 12 of them may already be obsolete given the Emperor's unprecedented show of respect, which suggests a paradigm shift in court dynamics that could potentially dash Lady Crystal Lees," Toji interrupted, your thoroughness is appreciated. God, woman, stop talking. You're giving me a headache. Oh. Yes, of course, she replied, her crystalline body reconfiguring slightly. I've also drafted contingency plans should any diplomatic incidents occur during tonight's festivities, including but not limited to assassination attempts, probability 3.7%, cultural misunderstandings, probability 28.9%, or catastrophic structural failure of the ceremonial hall, probability 0.02%, but still worth planning for. As Lady Crystal Lees continued her anxious monologue, TOJI noticed a mechanical body with a brain floating in green fluid approaching. Inefficient conversation detected, the newcomer stated, speaking at 2.5 times normal speed, even faster than the lady. Lady Crystal Lees, your anxiety-driven verbosity wastes valuable oxygen. Lord TOJI, I am Arch-Scientist Neuron, Director of Imperial Research and Development. Your power readings exceed established parameters for organic beings. Request permission to study your cellular structure. Request denied, TOJI responded flatly. Great, from one weirdo to another. It seems I finally understand where Frieza got her sensibilities in subordinates. First the Ginyu Force, now these guys. It's probably hereditary. If so, I need to beat it out of Megumi before it fully establishes when he grows up. Anticipated response. Alternative proposal, limited non-invasive scanning during your residence. Data would advance Imperial science by approximately 47.3 years. Before TOJI could respond, a golden skin being approached, his body seeming to flow like liquid metal as he moved. Lord TOJI. What an honor, the golden being exclaimed. Lord Aurum, Imperial Treasurer, at your service. Please accept this modest token of welcome. He extended his hand, revealing an intricate sculpture made from what appeared to be compressed stardust. This represents only 0.0001% of the resources now under your jurisdiction, Aurum continued enthusiastically. I've already established development funds for 50 worlds in your territory to stimulate economic growth. Would you prefer this platinum ceremonial armor as well? I have 17 more sets. TOJI accepted the stardust sculpture with a slight nod. Your generosity is noted, Lord Aurum. Let me guess. The first one is a paranoid, perpetually anxious woman who appears to talk a lot. The second is some brain in a jar that has no semblance of understanding of privacy and is as blunt as a hammer with his words. This guy is probably one that cannot stop giving people things. Throughout the evening, more court members approached, a masked figure known as High Inquisitor Void who spoke in riddles. A silver-skinned shapeshifter called Regent Helix whose form subtly mimicked whoever he spoke to, a maternal figure named Matron Sylvana who inappropriately discussed Megumi's genetic potential, an electrical being introduced as Admiral Tempest who could barely speak without shorting nearby equipment, and many others. These people are insane, Nappa commented telepathically to the group. They're fascinating. Bulma countered. Every one of them is different and unique with their own perspectives and roles. I can't wait to get to know them better. I don't trust any of them, Vegeta added. Especially that shapeshifter. We should keep our guard up. As the evening progressed, Grand Marshal Talon approached TOJI again, this time with a formal bow. Lord TOJI, tradition dictates that conventional new members of the inner circle demonstrate their worthiness through skill rather than power alone. Would you honor me with a formal duel? A hush fell over the nearby courtiers, all eyes turning to witness TOJI's response. A duel? TOJI's mechanical voice betrayed no emotion. A demonstration of martial skill, Talon clarified, his forearms gesturing expressively. Without the use of ki beyond the power level of 10,000, I myself am one of the few beings in the universe capable of controlling my power level, and no flight permitted. I would not dare challenge the full might of one who equaled the Empress herself. This would be merely ceremonial. Toji considered the request. His conversation with Frieza the previous evening had left him in an unusually good mood. Perhaps humoring this tradition would help establish his position in the court. "I accept your challenge, Grand Marshal." Talon's scales rippled with excitement as he bowed deeply. "You honor me, Lord Toji. I shall select my weapons." The crowd parted, creating a circular arena in the center of the hall. Servants brought forth an ornate weapons rack, from which Talon selected for different weapons, one for each of his arms. A massive sword, a spiked club, a double-headed axe, and a war hammer, each sized appropriately for his 10-foot frame. "And what weapon will you choose, Lord Toji?" Talon inquired, his yellow eyes gleaming with anticipation. Toji remained motionless for a moment, the mechanical breathing filling the silence. Then, with a subtle gesture, he extended his hand toward the weapons rack. A sword flew from the rack, sailing across the space to land perfectly in his outstretched palm. The crowd gasped at this casual display of telekinesis. But Toji wasn't finished. With deliberate showmanship, he gripped the sword's blade in his fist and, with a flex of his immense strength, shattered it, leaving only the hilt in his hand. "Lord Toji, that was a priceless artifact from Talon began, but stopped as Toji raised the broken hilt. Focusing his ki, Toji channeled his energy into the hilt, not just any energy, but a specific emotion. He concentrated on pure malice, on bloodlust, on the primal urge to dominate and destroy, in a trick he'd learned after being so close to Frieza's ki for so long and on the receiving end of her death beam. A cylinder of brilliant red ki emerged from the hilt, extending about 3 feet and humming with power. Heat radiated from the energy blade, causing the air around it to shimmer. "Are you seriously making a lightsaber right now?" Bulma's mental voice was filled with amused disbelief. "You're enjoying this Vader role way too much." "Shut up," Toji grumbled mentally, giving her a gentle mental shove that contained no real annoyance. Talon's eyes widened with delight. "Magnificent! A weapon of pure energy. This shall be a duel worthy of epic tales. I shall oversee this match," King Cold suddenly offered from his throne, causing the person who stepped forward to be referee to step back with a deep bow towards the king. The Grand Marshal took his position, each of his forearms wielding a different weapon with practiced ease. Toji stood opposite him, the red kisaber held in a relaxed grip at his side, his cape settling around him dramatically. "Begin!" King Cold commanded from his throne. Talon moved with immense speed, all 4 weapons coordinating in an attack pattern. The sword came in high, the axe low, while the club and hammer approached from opposite sides, a perfect 4-pronged assault that would be impossible for most beings to defend against. Toji didn't move until the last possible moment. Then, with a single fluid motion, he pivoted, the red kisaber tracing an arc that intercepted all 4 weapons simultaneously. Sparks flew as the energy blade connected with metal, the impact sending vibrations through Talon's arms. "Impressive," the Grand Marshal exclaimed, recovering quickly and launching into his next attack sequence. What followed was a dance focused on how precise and skilled the warriors were. Talon used his 4 weapons as well as he could, constantly switching up to new ways of attacking when one failed. Toji himself responded with casual ease to each new way of attack, his kisaber leaving trails of red light as he deflected, parried, and countered. The court watched in fascination. It was rare to see such skilled warriors fight. Talon's attacks grew increasingly elaborate, his weapons becoming a blur as he attempted to find an opening in Toji's defense. "Your technique is remarkable for one so young," he called out, genuine respect in his voice. "How long have you trained in the martial arts?" "The way of the ones born strong is one of many abilities some would consider to be unnatural," Toji replied, as he blocked all 4 weapons simultaneously above his head with ease, sparks flying. He was enjoying this little exercise. In a hidden base carved into an asteroid at the edge of the capital galaxy, 5 figures gathered around a holographic display showing the Imperial capital from orbit. "The moment has come," Supreme Commander Lyra Stardust announced, her green skin illuminated by the hologram's glow. The scar across her face seemed to pulse with the intensity of her focus. For the first time in centuries, the Cold family and the highest ranks of the Empire are gathered in one location. The probability of success is exactly 42.7%. For Argos 9. Beautiful day to die gloriously, isn't it? Ha ha ha. General K's wreckage Demolus boomed, his cybernetic eye glowing red with excitement. The Saiyang survivors' remaining organic parts tensed with anticipation. 70 years we've waited for this chance. The firing sequence requires... Dr. Nima Whisperwind began, her voice barely audible through her exosuit. Careful calibration. The less you understand about the full process, the safer we all. And now, Captain Silvertongue observes the historic moment, his mercury heart pumping with the thrill of imminent vengeance, declared the shapeshifter, his silver form rippling as he narrated his own actions. The World Terror's power cells are at 97.3% capacity, my sweet darling weapon, Engineer Grit Rust Bucket muttered, her 6 arms working various controls simultaneously. There's only a 78.9% chance we'll all be vaporized by feedback. We're all going to die, but at least we'll take cold with us. We feel your resolve, intoned the voice, a chorus of harmonized tones emanating from the unremarkable humanoid's glowing throat. We all share your purpose. For those who died. For those who will live free. Supreme Commander Stardust raised her hand, her green fingers trembling slightly. 70 years, 213 days, 7 hours, and 54 minutes we have waited. Today, we act. For Homeworld. She brought her hand down decisively. Fire. The massive weapon, a planetoid that had been hollowed out and converted into a weapon of unimaginable destruction, began to glow with yellow energy. Decades of accumulated ki for this weapon, like the blasters of the Frieza Force soldiers but immensely larger, harvested from countless sources, focused into a single point before erupting in a beam the size of a small moon. The yellow energy streaked across space, crossing light years in moments through artificial wormhole technology, aimed directly at the throne world of the Imperial capital. For the fallen, Lyra whispered, tears streaming down her scarred face. Back at the Imperial banquet, TOJI was about to disarm Grand Marshal Talon with a particularly clever maneuver when he suddenly froze, his head turning sharply upward. A distant rumbling shook the ceremonial hall. Courtiers looked around in confusion as chandeliers swayed and drinks rippled in their glasses. Through the massive skylight above, the night sky suddenly blazed with yellow light, as if a second sun had appeared directly above the palace. Panic erupted among the court members. Beings of all species scrambled for exits or cowered in fear. Only a select few remained calm, King Cold, still seated on his throne, Frieza, who moved protectively toward Megumi, and TOJI's companions, who looked surprised but not particularly worried. Vegeta as well put up a barrier around Bulma and himself. Without a word, TOJI casually raised his left hand toward the ceiling, his right still holding the Kisaber. Outside, visible through the skylight, the moon-sized yellow energy beam halted in place, suspended above the planet's atmosphere as if it had struck an invisible barrier. King Cold rose from his throne casually and approached TOJI, a glass of red wine in his hand, seemingly unsurprised by the events unfolding. "Oh, so that's where it was," he remarked conversationally. "I thought it was lost and no longer functional, but it seems I was misinformed." TOJI turned his head slightly toward Cold, his hand still raised, effortlessly holding the massive energy beam at bay. "What is this?" he asked, his voice betraying no strain despite the monumental feat he was performing. "The Terror World," Cold explained, sipping his wine. "A weapon designed to destroy entire solar systems for more efficient Imperial expansion. It was stolen by rebels 70 years ago." The scientist who created it was killed by a traitor who deleted all the information we had of it. In retaliation, I sent Cooler to hunt the rebels down to near extinction. He did a good enough job, but never recovered the Terra. He shrugged elegantly. I assumed it had been lost or rendered non-functional. Around them, scientists from the court were frantically taking readings, their instruments struggling to quantify what they were witnessing. "This is impossible," one exclaimed. The Terra was the greatest technological achievement in Imperial history. Its power was calculated to be unstoppable. Lord TOJI is holding it back with one hand. Another whispered in awe. The mathematical implications are staggering. TOJI's mechanical breathing filled the momentary silence before he spoke. "Don't be too proud of this technological terror you've constructed. The ability to destroy worlds is insignificant next to the power of Ki." With that statement, he clenched his raised hand into a fist and swiped it sideways. Outside, the moon-sized yellow beam compressed instantly, crushed into particles that scattered harmlessly into space. The court erupted in astonished murmurs and exclamations. Many dropped to their knees in renewed submission, while others stared in silent shock. TOJI turned to King Cold. "I'll handle this," he stated simply. Before anyone could respond, TOJI crouched slightly, then launched himself upward with such force that the floor beneath him cracked. He crashed through the skylight, becoming a streak of darkness against the night sky as he ascended toward the Terra world's position. Minutes later, after traversing the galaxy with a jump, TOJI crashed like a burning comet onto the Terra World Central Command Center, where he had sensed the concentration of the strongest beings. The impact created a crater in the metal floor, sending rebel soldiers flying in all directions. What dash foo dash who in the dash aaa dash? It was a chorus of yells and curses. As the dust settled, a red glow illuminated the darkened corridor. The mechanical breathing echoed ominously as Lord TOJI stepped forward through the cloud of debris, his kisaber casting crimson light across the terrified faces of the rebellion's leadership. "Who is your master?"
And that concludes this episode. If you enjoyed it, I'd seriously love it if you guys could leave a like on the video, as it genuinely helps out so much, and it keeps me going, plus it takes only 1 second. That said, have a wonderful day. See you in the next one.